see. I was blind.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder. It's time to look in the mirror, America. Do you like what you see?
I keep referring to Obama as the magic Negro.
Do you like what you see now?
Well, suck on this.
It's just a mirror, America.
Shared sacrifice by everybody.
What could it do to you except reflect your image?
I did nothing wrong at the Minneapolis airport.
The Majority Report.
Far more credible to me than PBS and Frontline.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Tuesday, October 24th, 2017. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, shock doctrine in full effect in Puerto Rico. Ryan Zinke sends a cleanup crew that did not even exist before the hurricane hit the island. Meanwhile, Bill O'Reilly is pissed at God. Apparently God partially responsible for his massive harassment payouts. Speaking of harassment, the assault on the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau begins by Republicans. They have 2 short weeks to get rid of the provision that protects consumers from so-called arbitration clauses. And after unshackling debt collectors, Betsy DeVos calls disabled students rights. Meanwhile, Xi Jinping goes big time in China. Bigly. So huge. And the new season of Handmaid's Tale is here. There's forced birth for immigrants under the Trump administration. More white terror, unworthy of news. And Bannon supposedly dumps Milo. Meanwhile, millions of children risk losing health care in just a matter of weeks because CHIP remains unfunded. All this and more on today's program, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, we are back from Vegas. By we, I mean me. I mean, there are other people who are back from Vegas, I imagine. I also imagine there are some people who stayed there. If you did not hear the interviews from Thursday and Friday, I would encourage you to go. We did 2 interviews on opioids, which are a nice companion piece to what you can read in the New Yorker now about Purdue Pharmaceuticals. They are at one end of the supply chain, and according to the attorneys that I spoke to last week, the suits, the major suits, at least initially, will come with the distribution mechanism because those folks had a statutory obligation to report on what was happening. I imagine there's other potential areas where people could be sued in the context of opioids, but certainly these 3 major companies that had a statutory obligation to report what they were seeing. And then ultimately, we had this congressman who just had to step down from being the drug czar nominee, who lobbied to roll back those statutory obligations on those companies from reporting what they were undoubtedly seeing, which is, wow, we're selling an awful lot of opioid pills to a small amount of people. That seems weird. But check those out. Also, I did not win big time.
Did you lose big time or just not a win?
I mean,
Was
I
it tough
lost
stuff,
big time for
or
me.
was
It was
in
tough
a certain
stuff.
sense? Okay, got it.
It was. There were 2 zeros after the number that I lost.
Tough stuff.
Tough stuff. $300.
Tough stuff.
It was tough. And I gambled a lot. So in some ways, it was. I kept going up. I kept going down. I was up a couple $100.
Are you
down a
drinking
couple.
unusually heavily this time?
No. Why do you keep asking me that?
I was just wondering.
Well, I
I'm
think I
just
probably
curious.
drank less.
Ooh.
That could be the problem.
Defensive.
Huh?
Very defensive.
I was very focused.
I
in on-
drank less.
Well, because I spent more time at the tables, and I won't drink.
Oh, you're focused at the tables. Very serious business.
Well, I used to try and act like I was drunk so that they thought they could get one over me, but that doesn't work that way. I did sit at the table of my favorite dealer, who's at the Bellagio, who tells you to double down. If you're sitting at a 6-5 odds table, double down on a blackjack against the 6.
Who are you impersonating when you pretend?
I'm joking. I didn't pretend I was drunk. That would be childish.
Right. It's totally.
Well,
say no more about
I
something you
understand
would
the
never
dynamic
do.
where it's not like the dealer says like, "Oh, here's a drunk guy. I'm going to be able to take advantage." It's not the dealer's money. It's not the way it works. It's not like I was going
You
into
have
like
a structural
illegal
understanding of how Las
Yes,
Vegas
it's not like
works,
I'm going
so
into an
very
illegal
sophisticated.
poker game and
See, that sounds fun.
no, I didn't do that. But as always, Vegas was. I always learn something. I will also tell you that anticipate lawsuits regarding the shooting. There may already be some in terms of the bump fire stocks, bump stocks, but there's going to be more. And it seems rather obvious. You walk around the casino, there's a tremendous amount of security. One would assume, like, what else would you be able to protect us from?
That story has really, I mean, was it still really present in Vegas? Like, it's totally disappeared from national conversation. It's kind of amazing. I mean, it's the usual shock and trance thing.
When in Vegas, particularly at these conferences, I don't go outside of the casino hotel area very much at all. I have no cause to. Although they do have something where you can go and rent like a huge backhoe and dig stuff for like $250, like for 90 minutes, and I will be doing that next time. But in the casino, I believe in sort of like some quiet conversations I had with some people who work there, people are supposed to not bring it up and not discuss it. Because obviously everyone there are tourists and there's, I don't know, some type of fear or whatnot. When I spoke to some people outside of the casino and some of those people on the sly, there was, people were upset. There was a slight feeling like I remember from post 9/11, where there's just sort of like a tentativeness and a little bit of shock. There is, I imagine it's not, the same level of intensity, but it's also, you experience these things and you see them. I think people who are closer in proximity to what was going on, or in terms of people they knew, it was obviously much more disturbing. But it was weird. There was a little bit of eeriness, but it's also that place is very geared towards tourists, and so they don't. There was a big attempt not to talk about it. I want to get into this story about what's going on with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau because it has to do with some of what we spoke about in Vegas in terms of Equifax and in terms of identity theft and just deals that you get into. But first, just a reminder. I mean, here's a question: do people? I think when in New York, for the most part, everyone we know lives in an apartment, and so you don't really contemplate the idea of an all heating system or cooling system having filters. Maybe, I guess, in sort of new buildings. But it's not the responsibility of the tenant to change it. But in houses, you have an air filter if you have a forced air system. And our geothermal system is a forced air system. So I've been dealing with filters for 15 years now. And it is a pain in the butt to source them. It is a pain in the butt to remember to remove them, and because you got to change them out or they're not doing their jobs. But they're super important. They keep dust levels down. They filter out airborne allergens. If you have asthma or allergies, it's a real problem unless you are using these filters to keep it clean. And the number one problem with home filters, right? I mean, you can buy any type of filter. You can get certain levels of what kind of pathogens they'll pull out of, or little particles they'll pull out of the air. The quality of these things vary, but not so dramatically. The number one problem is forgetting to change them. The average homeowner changes their filters 1 to 2 times a year, and the minimum is 4. That's the very minimum. And the beauty of Filter Easy is that it reminds you to change them, and you don't have to store a big box of filters like I do. For years, I just had these huge boxes, and I would because I would always forget, like, where did I get these things from? I don't want to remember. And this is so much easier. You don't have to forget to change the air filters. They deliver the exact size of home filter to your door when it's time to replace. You save 5 to 15% on all home air conditioning costs by keeping your air conditioning and heating systems cleaner. And they actually last longer. I got a big talk from my guy about that. You can get started today. Go to filtereasy.com, and Majority Report listeners will get their first delivery of a standard 1-inch air filter for free with free shipping. You'll see how easy it is. You'll never forget to change your air filter again. Visit filtereasy.com/report and enter the promo code REPORT on the homepage. Check it out. All right, so one of the things, if you recall, during the Equifax breach was that when you signed in, initially, they tried to do this. When you signed in to see if your stuff has been given out, and I mentioned in that interview that we had on Friday, or I think it was on Thursday, that I had frozen all my accounts after that, because when I went through, it said, yeah, you got a problem. Here's our free, credit protection service. And apparently, at one point during the wake of that, if you signed up for that, you automatically, when it hit, I agree, you automatically agreed to arbitration. Now, here's the thing. When you're talking about two different parties who are basically economically entering an agreement with basically the same power dynamic, okay? More or less. No one's leveraging one thing over another. And arbitration is fine in those instances. But what we have going on in this country is corporations forcing us into arbitration situations that make it much harder for us to get redress. And it's not just because in an arbitration system it's going to be fair and we won't get paid out. It's just that financially speaking, if we don't have the ability to go, let's say, into a class action, into an arbitration situation, if we can't band with other people, it's not worth our while. This is coming out of that Concepcion case in California where AT&T charged all their customers an extra $3 and continually did it. And the court would not allow all of the customers to band together. And of course, it's not worth it for anybody to go in to get $3 back or whatever that amount was. So the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau had an arbitration rule which inhibited a company's ability to force you into arbitration. All right, and we see these in employee things, and that's a lot of the reason why you don't hear, in some instances, like issues of sexual harassment and whatnot, because there's some type of arbitration, forced arbitration in labor disputes. So it's CFPB rule number 1. Congress, the Senate in particular, has until November 13th to use a Congressional Review Act resolution. This is the thing where any regulations passed in the last 6 months of the prior administration can be undone in the first, I don't know what it is, 10 months of the next congressional session. And they have a week and a half to do this. And Treasury Department is the one pushing this. There's still an opportunity. We should tweet out, Dave Dayen has talked about who are basically fence sitters on this. Because it's
Is it on his Twitter?
It's a Congressional Review Act. They only need a simple majority vote. There are swing votes in the rule are Kennedy from Louisiana, Collins from Maine, Portman from Ohio, Murkowski. So if you live in those states in particular, but if you just want to randomly call them, it's worth it. It's important. Meanwhile, Puerto Rico still just dealing with an untold amount of, literally untold amount of suffering. And Ryan Zinke, this is pretty crazy. So Puerto Rico has a state-owned utility. Usually what happens in these instances when a utility company is dealing with this type of devastation, they usually get into mutual aid agreements with other utilities in a similar locality. Okay? So, for instance, Florida, Texas, they have these agreements. Florida gets hit. They send electrical workers from Texas over there to help with the grid because obviously they have an apparatus and they have a team set up, et cetera, et cetera. So for whatever reason, it's unclear why. I'm sure it has absolutely nothing to do with Ryan Zinke, who's the Interior Secretary. Puerto Rico state-owned utilities turned to a company that is only 2 years old from Montana that on the day Maria hit Puerto Rico had 2 employees. 2 employees. Now, maybe they were the most expert.
Best people.
The best people, the most.
Only the best.
Well-versed when it came to Puerto Rico's electrical grid.
There can't be 25 best people. There can only be 2.
There's only 2.
They wrote
and
what they
of
versed.
course, they're in Montana.
Zinke, clever guy.
Well,
Where's my cut?
Here's the thing. The hurricane hits. If they're in Puerto Rico, maybe they get hurt. If they're in Montana, no chance.
Got to think ahead.
Got to stay away from
A lot of Puerto Ricans don't think ahead, and
The
that's a
company
problem, folks.
is Whitefish Energy. And it said that it had signed a $300 million contract with the Puerto Rico Electric Power Authority to repair and reconstruct large portions of the island's electrical infrastructure. It is the biggest contract issued in the relief effort. As of Monday, Whitefish now has 280 workers in the territory using linemen from across the country, most of them subcontractors, and that number grows on average from 10 to 20 people a day. So at least the money is not being paid to a corporate structure within Puerto Rico that could pay taxes on something like that, maybe. Right. Oh, right. No, well, the two guys back in Montana are on the phones with him constantly. How's it going? The Power Authority, known as PREPA, opted to hire Whitewash rather than activate the mutual aid agreements it has with other utilities. Unclear why. Whitefish, did I call it Whitewash? They've said the company's expertise in mountainous areas makes it well suited for the work. Those two guys.
These guys know mountains. They know mountains. I mean, it's unbelievable. I didn't know Puerto Rico had mountains. I thought it only had rum, like bad loans.
It says it acknowledged that it only had 2 full-time employees when Maria struck, but says its business model calls for ramping up rapidly by hiring workers on short-term contracts. Nice. Nice. Super nice. Meanwhile, Zinke, there was a story in Politico that Zinke has been deeply involved in scam PACs.
Where's my cut?
That operate out of the Caribbean.
Nice.
So the whole scam PAC thing, if you've ever signed up for an email from any Republican entity or any conservative thing, they sell your email almost quicker than it takes them to actually send you an email. And eventually you will get emails from these scam organizations. And what they do is they raise money. It's a tax-free donation. And then they spend all the money on their operating costs of their life.
It's not a bad one.
Zinke has some very weird relationships, apparently. He, again, was the congressman from Montana until he became Secretary of the Interior. I can't imagine that Zinke was down in Puerto Rico saying, like, you should maybe use this outfit. I don't know. So Zinke has had this relationship with this guy, Scott McKenzie, he's the organizer of the Virgin Islands GOP Political Action Committee.
Pretty important group. They've done a lot for Rob and me and a lot of us, in fact.
Republicans in the Caribbean island chain have accused McKenzie of misrepresenting itself to donors.
What, that's a crime now?
It's a crime. It's not a crime. It's just a mistake. Nobody's accusing Zinke of doing anything illegal, but one campaign finance expert said that the information gleaned from this report on McKenzie's PACs show that Zinke was not behaving like a typical politician. And I don't think it was he was bucking the system. Zinke is separately facing investigations by Interior's internal watchdog and independent office of special counsel over his habit of mixing politics and official business. He has cut his ties with these PACs since he's been sworn in, but apparently these PACs he's been using to drive money there. And some, like this one guy, Representative Will Hurd from Texas, was angered when the Virgin Islands GOP used his photo without permission on fundraising solicitations.
Oh, so we shouldn't spread the free market to the Virgin Islands now?
And he said that the Virgin Island groups and Forthright, which is another one of these PACs, are preying on seniors in a disgusting attempt to enrich themselves, which, oddly enough, is also the logo of the Republican Party.
You're disgusting my enrichment.
Forthright says it raised $1.9 million for Zinke's 2014 race by sending out 1.6 million pieces of email, attracting 44,000 new donors. About half of that haul went to Zinke's campaign for voter mail, radio ads, TV ads, get out the vote activities, and lawn signs. But that was less than the $608,000 that Zinke campaign spent on postage and direct mail from Century Data Mailing Service. So they're.
What are we doing? I'm going to
know.
become a Republican congressman.
It was just very weird.
This is
The
so
operating
obvious.
608,000 on postage was spent on direct mail services that is located, oddly enough, in the exact same address as the PAC.
Well, you fucking know.
We're going to show you how to raise money completely tax-free and then spend it with yourself on the materials that you use to raise the money.
Yeah,
and
I
that's
think-
the business.
I think I found the renewable resource. Oh.
Oh, my God.
Hey, is this, am I remembering correctly that, was one of DeLay's scandals that he had a relationship with Guam?
Not Guam. It was the Mariana Islands.
The Mariana
if I remember
Islands.
correctly.
And part of the scam was that
They would pay him to get labor laws
then they
excluded.
yes, but they could put made in the USA, but then
Yes.
have the same conditions as any Asian sweatshop. That
Exactly.
was the hustle, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. All right, let me tell you this story. This story is so effing disturbing. I don't even know how to respond to this. Yes, I do. So apparently, there is a woman, we don't know her name. She is 17 years old. She is a Central American immigrant who crossed the border without documentation. She asked a 3-judge panel of the U.S. Court of Appeals, District of Columbia, to order the federal government to let her obtain an abortion. She has been seeking this abortion for over a month now. The appeals court panel gave the Department of Health and Human Services 11 days to find a sponsor to take custody of the girl. The government is opposing the request. She realized she was pregnant around the time that she was detained shortly after crossing the border. Listen to how the Washington Post describes this. She is currently being held in a government-funded shelter in South Texas run by a private contractor. So she's being held against her will in a government-funded shelter. That's so nice of the government to fund a shelter that's run by a private contractor. Oh, there's another word for that. Private concentration camp? Is that what we call that?
Yeah, quite literally.
Private detention center?
Say it in a German accent.
Pro-life.
A government-funded shelter. Oh, that's so sweet. That is holding her there. I think definitionally a shelter is something that you seek, not necessarily that you're held at. The teen has permission from a state judge to obtain an abortion, but Trump administration officials have refused to allow anyone to transport her to the clinic. They are literally preventing her from exercising a legal right that she has. Trump's government says it has a policy of refusing to facilitate abortions for undocumented minors. The Obama administration allowed them. There is a well-settled Supreme Court precedent that holds that the government may not impose an undue burden on or completely block a woman's ability to obtain an abortion. They are not allowed to do this. The Justice Department also reiterated the government's view that the teen could solve the problem herself by voluntarily leaving the United States and seeking to terminate her pregnancy elsewhere. Okay? But wait, it gets worse. Because the government acknowledged just Friday that the country where she would be deported to, abortion is illegal. Here is a clip of her attorney, I guess, right? On MSNBC. This is crazy. This story is it's just nuts. This is forcing a woman to have a child.
To allow her to be transported by anyone to the abortion facility. As a result, she's being held hostage by the federal government, and she's not allowed to access her constitutional rights.
I knew at one point her parents were involved. Her parents were contacted. What happened there?
Her parents in her home country were contacted, which also is just unbelievable. She suffered abuse at the hands of her parents in her home country, and nevertheless, the federal government contacted them and told them about her pregnancy. This is extremely dangerous for young women who are already abused at the hands of their parents, for the government to be telling them confidential information that could further damage that relationship.
And at one point the government said, we're not saying that she can't necessarily get an abortion. She could always return to her home country to get one if she wanted to.
Which is absolutely absurd. Nobody should have to choose between going back to their home country, facing abuse in their home country, and exercising their constitutional rights. She's here in the United States. She has constitutional rights, and the government is denying her.
I want to read part of another email from Lloyd telling staff that, quote, the unborn child is a child in our care, and also says a pregnant girl should be prevented from meeting with her attorney or going to a judge. Prevented from meeting with an attorney or going to a judge.
That's right. Scott Lloyd wants to authorize every single step in the way of any sort of abortion process. He wants to be able to say yes or no to the ultimate abortion decision, and the Supreme Court has said that that is blatantly unconstitutional. No one can have a veto power over another person's abortion decision.
All right, we're going to stay with this. Bridget and Mary, thank you.
And I would remind you that her home country, abortion is illegal. And before any dum-dums call in to say, how can she have constitutional rights when she's not a citizen of the United States? And before any dum-dums write it in any comment section.
You're covering a lot of dum-dum platforms
do
here.
a little Googling, do a little reading. She's in this country. She is afforded constitutional rights. So if you don't like it, then leave this country and find a different constitution.
That's right.
This is sick. And, this is the way that precedents get created, too.
Isn't that
the
what
government is
they're doing
protecting the unborn child?
Isn't that why they're doing it?
I would imagine it's a twofer.
Her,
I think it's a twofer. I mean, again, I think they're doing everything they can to scare and terrorize immigrants in this country. Yes. They're doing everything they can to be as draconian as possible. But yes, this is a twofer. If they could get a a circuit court, 3-judge panel, if they could get a full circuit court, 3-judge panel could just be 3 conservative justices picked by Republicans, which is what happens when you elect a Republican, just as a reminder. The full D.C. Circuit Court is still mostly picked by a Democrat. So they tend to not be as horrific as this. But would that set a precedent? They certainly would try. They would certainly try to have it. All right. Should we play this Bill O'Reilly sound before we go into the fun half?
God, why?
This is pretty good.
Why is that? For sake of me.
So, Bill O'Reilly today, apparently, on his No Spin News web show, which we did not want to spring for. And here's the interesting thing.
Part of me does, to be really honest.
Well, we've bought one before, but we got to wait until Dennis Miller comes on to discuss the $32 million. Because if Dennis Miller has any integrity as a comedian or performer, he's going to give O'Reilly shit about the $32 million. It's got to be something like, Hey, Bill, remember that time you gave me a massage? Can I have $1 million? Something like that. It's going to be something like that.
It's like the brig when Scotty beamed up the blah, 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 blah.
Right.
Can you give me $1 million?
You got completely...
That's the next stage of Miller is he literally doesn't even do the filler. He just goes, it's like Star Trek, blah, 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 blah. Give me $2 million, Billy? I'm just kidding.
Hey.
I'm depressed too, Billy. I'm eating Pepperidge Farm cookies and thinking about homeless people still getting social programs.
You got totally Klingon there. It was like that time where the Klingons had the special Zargon plutonium crystal.
And then the
dropped it in your
Romulans
drink.
showed up. And then you had to give a big payout because you kept calling this black girl chocolate milk. Bada bing.
Here's the thing. When Bill O'Reilly left Fox, when Bill O'Reilly was fired from Fox, for the life of me, I couldn't understand why he was doing his podcast. Like, buddy, just roll it up. You know, enjoy your millions. And I actually think that he may be somewhat cash starved. I mean, he had to give out $32 million. God knows what you do to have to do a $32 million payout. It goes well beyond any, Title IX payout numbers. That is big money.
On the show yesterday, we're doing his attorneys being like, Bill, please just even let us have a vacation. Could you do a week without harassing somebody at work?
So
is
this
there
guy's
any
paid out
possibility?
tens of millions of dollars. Not to mention, he just got divorced. And
Bitch.
And
Fucking
presumably,
bitch.
I don't know if the
God.
I don't know if the settlement was like, we need to have a fund. We need to keep a fund alive just in case.
This settlement will determine whether or not I keep my faith or not. Fuck!
So, No Spin News web show. According to CNN, after the Times, O'Reilly had this to say. Am I mad at God? Yeah. I'm mad at him, O'Reilly said. I wish I had more protection.
Sorry about that, buddy.
I wish this stuff didn't happen. I can't explain it to you. Yeah, I'm mad at him.
God went PC, Billy. Hanging out with God is like being on the set of Hair, except no one's getting laid anymore. Ba-da-ba.
Billy, remember that time I said you could do horrible things to people who are working for you? No, I was just joking around. Sorry.
Sorry.
Sorry
Sorry about
I was just messing with you.
PC culture's even catching up with me.
My bad. I really let you down.
For thousands of years, consent was very negotiable, but around 2015, it started to actually mean something.
That's right.
Those college kids even got to me. Sorry, Billy.
I got you confused with some guy from, back in late antiquity.
Yeah, I meant that if you lived in Babylonian times, you could do that to your assistant. Not in the 21st century. Jesus Christ.
Yes, I didn't realize.
I mean, quite literally, Jesus Christ.
You don't understand up here. Time is dilated. And so everything is happening at once.
Everything is moving faster.
So
it's
just
happening
like
at
you
once.
track.
You're losing your track of time. You're on your iPhone. You're saying, "Can I see your pussy?" to one of your assistants, and you realize you're not in Roman times anymore, Bill. It doesn't
so
work.
Strange. I thought you were a shepherd. That was the problem. I forgot what was going on. So sorry.
Hey, Bill. You know who really is a shepherd? Wait for it. Hannity. I'm just fucking with you. No, but seriously, you are going to have to pay out.
Yeah.
You should be mad at me. For sake me.
Bill O'Reilly's lawyer put out a statement. Once again, the New York Times has maliciously smeared Bill O'Reilly. Well, that's good for Bill O'Reilly, because I think if you maliciously smear someone in your publication, there's going to be some compensation that's going to come back to O'Reilly. This time, even failing to print a sworn affidavit from his former lawyer, Liz Weil, repudiating all the allegations against Bill O'Reilly. Now, isn't she the one who actually got the settlement?
I believe so.
So they're arguing that We have a sworn affidavit repudiating all the allegations she made after she got the $32 million.
She said she liked it, and she put it in an affidavit, but I wanted to give her $32 million because I support women in media. Fucking New York Times and God and my wife and fucking everybody.
I want to make this absolutely clear because there's, I don't want to get caught up in any litigation. I would speculate that the timing went, the money shows up in the bank. She literally goes in and checks the money in the bank. Maybe even counts the money and then signs the document. That's my guess as to what the order of those things happened. Here is Bill O'Reilly after he had an interview with the New York Times. The New York Times explains how they captured this audio. Folks, when you're sitting down with Bill O'Reilly, you always have 2 recorders, not 1.
So we had lugged the special recorder from the Daily and brought it with us. So we had the high quality audio, and we stand up and we turn off that recorder. We still we're recording on our phones, and at that point, O'Reilly wants to make a last point.
If you really wanted to know the truth, you'd let him tell you on background.
And it's at that point that he gets as animated as I've ever seen anyone in any type of interview that I've been in.
Yes, we have physical proof that this is bullshit. Bullshit. Okay? So, it's on you if you want to destroy my children further. Right? Because it's all crap.
It's almost like you can feel the vibrations in your own chest.
Why don't you be human beings once? This is horrible. It's horrible what I went through. Horrible what my family went through. This is crap. And you know it. It's politically and financially motivated. And we can prove it with shocking information. But I'm not going to sit there in a courtroom for a year and a half and let my kids get beaten up every single day of their lives by a tabloid press who would sit there, and you know it. All right. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Oh, my God.
Now, look, it's conceivable that he is seeking to protect his children, who, over the course of the year-long case, might be subjected. Might be. It's not like he's might be subjected to this. But they also might have, at the end of this, the opportunity to clear his name. Feel like Daddy fought the good fight. And also, we still have access to that $32 million.
Yeah, my kids aren't pussies like Bowling's kid, all right? So they're not going to off themselves based off of one allegation. But you keep going for it. And the liberal media and David Brock and Media Matters, maybe it's 30 allegations. Even the biggest non-pussy, non-bowling style kid might off themselves.
How low do you go to make this about your children? Right? Like, I can understand you want to protect your kids, but I got a feeling that his behavior up to now, at one point, somewhere around like the $25th million that you've paid out of the 60 some odd million, right? Isn't it like up to like 40 million? 40, yeah. What is it? It's upwards of 40 some odd million dollars that you have paid out. At one point around like the $3rd or $4th or $6th million, you say like, you know what? I've got to stand up for myself because this is just going to keep going on and on.
Yeah, you know what, Bill? This is
$40 million.
This is God again, Bill. You've had a nice run telling black people to pull their pants up and harassing every single woman from the age of 20 to 60 in your vicinity for decades. Maybe it's time to just take an L on this one. Sometimes you have to, as Tim Black would say.
Honestly, like the fact that he's so deep into it, he can't even see it from 5 feet away.
He clearly thinks he's a victim. Obviously.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt.
It's a classic bit of misdirection, right? Like, if you don't, it's putting the blame on the people who are reporting on this stuff instead of the people who are doing it.
They're dragging him down.
Those reporters did sound pretty annoying, though. I gotta be. They sounded exactly like the kind of annoying sort of like NPR narrator. Like, Bill, we have more evidence of you harassing people. It's just like, oh, fuck you, God. Some fucking ironclast sounding motherfuckers exposing more of my endless harassment.
Maybe
All right,
that
so
was part of the trap.
I spent $40 million.
Jamie,
on this shit.
when we go into the fun half, because it's such a fun topic, Jamie has been getting a lot of calls from the British press today. Is that right?
Yep.
Why have you been getting all these calls? Is there like some type of like soccer match they want you to comment on?
Unfortunately, no. I guess it just came out today that Condé Nast sent out a memo to all of their international properties that nobody is to run any photography by Terry Richardson.
And this guy, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, because frankly, I didn't know until you told me who he was. And then like I mentioned it to people and they're like, of course, how could you not know who that guy is? But he's like a big fashion photographer. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, he's basically the Harvey Weinstein of the fashion world.
Sounds nice. And you exposed this guy 10 years ago, right?
In 2010, so 7 years ago, yeah.
And where was it?
Get your facts straight.
Where did you write that piece?
I wrote it for a little women's site called thegloss.com.
Thegloss.com.
Is that
All right,
still up?
you'll tell us more. I want to hear.
I think so.
Want to hear more about this in the fun half, because that's what the fun half is all about. We're
fun.
It's
all
fun
right,
for
folks.
liberals to destroy people's reputations, and then what happens is Bowling's kid offs himself.
All right. That's
That's the only apology that Bill O'Reilly's made out of this whole thing was that, you know what, Eric, shouldn't have talked about your kid killing himself in the context of
what did he?
This is where the joke is coming from.
Wait, O'Reilly.
O'Reilly tweeted an apology at him.
Oh,
Yeah.
I didn't even know that O'Reilly had addressed it,
Dude.
Oh, I missed that part.
Sorry about that, Eric. I shouldn't have talked about your pussy kid in the context of talking about how my kids might kill themselves if I get exposed for flashing my dick at women at work. It's a whole chain of events.
Psychos. Folks,
Fucking God.
Listen, we're going to head into the fun half, but we have an ask of you today. No, always, if you want to join the show, please do. Join themajority.report.com. But really important, we are trying to get a better sense of how people come to listen to the show, why they listen to the show, how they listen to the show. We don't ask you anything about your demographics or any of that stuff, although maybe that probably would have been a good idea, but screw it. People get uptight about that. And so I'm more interested in what and how you came to the show. And so head to majoritysurvey.com. If you are you'll see here, there are 3 surveys. Yeah, pull that right up. There are 3 surveys. If you listen to the free show and you're not a member, click on that and you will answer that 4-minute survey. If you watch live, or you watch our show on YouTube, click there and there's your survey. And if you're a podcast member, your survey is there as well. So please, I know it's a pain, but it's honestly, these are very quick surveys. It's all multiple choice. If you want, there's a room for comments if you want, but that's not necessary. Go there. It'll be extremely helpful for us. Has nothing to do with demographics. We don't ask anything about you other than how you came to listen to the show and maybe a little bit of what you like, but not product based or any of that crap. So it's really just a way for us to make this show better and to get more people to listen to the show or watch the show and maybe contemplate how we will grow the shows. Also, tonight, Michael Brooks is hosting this show called The Michael Brooks Show. And tonight, Waz and Hunter Matz. Is that a name of a person? Hunter Matz?
I believe that's the name of a person.
They will be debunking the race and IQ myths. What myths? I've been listening to... Oh, in other words, the way you say this is they're going to be promoting closed-mindedness. Right?
Yes.
Promoting closed-mindedness tonight on the Michael Brooks Show.
And disinviting people from the battlefield of ideas and shutting down open exchanges of debate.
Don't forget, majoritysurvey.com, majoritysurvey.com, majoritysurvey.com. 646-257-3920. We'll be right back with the fun half.
Think of all the times she said no, 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 no. Like to speak my mind. She said no, 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 no. And I know her time's not free. She didn't waste none on me. Situation sad. She said no, 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 no. Things are looking bad. She said no, 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 no. And if it was up to me, I'd tell her a thing or three. Every time I see her look my way, I don't know, girl, what to say. Situation sad. She said no, 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 no. Things are looking bad. She said no, 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 no. And if it was up to me, I'd tell her a thing or three. No, 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 no. No, 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 no. No, 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 no.
We are back. Sam Seder on the fun half. Head over to majoritysurvey.com, majoritysurvey.com. Let's go take a quick call. Calling from a 210 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Yeah, it's John from San Antonio. Good afternoon, Sam.
Hello, John from San
Yeah,
Antonio. Sorry. Hello. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing good.
Great.
Yeah, I enjoyed your conversation with Cenk Uygur on Friday. Justice Democrats added 12 new candidates to their roster last Tuesday. One of them is Rick Trevino, who I talked about on the show a few weeks ago, who's running the 23rd Congressional District in Texas.
Uh-huh.
His website is Rick for 23. So that's spelled out alphabetically, and the 23 is numerically.com. Another new addition is Doug Applegate, who's running in the 49th District of California, where he came within 0.6% or 0.6% of beating Darrell Issa, which is the smallest margin of victory of any race in the 2016 House races. Clinton won the district by 7.5%. Another Democrat, Michael Levin, has raised $915,000. Applegate has raised $527,000. Darrell Issa is down by 10 points in a public policy polling against a generic Democrat released on October 12th. So also Barbara Comstock is who's running in Virginia's 10th district. A Republican is down by 9 points. And there are two Republicans that have above margin of error leads. The other 8 races are within margin of error within 3 points, actually within 2 points. So on average, out of the 12 races, the Democrats outperformed the Republicans by 11 points over their margins in the 2016 election, and by 3.2% in the Trump-Clinton metric.
So the point being that these House races are ones where the Democrat has a good chance of winning, and therefore, what? I mean, what are the implications that you are? Is it about? I mean, because I know it sounds like that one in California. Maybe we're seeing the DCCC sort of get involved with money. I know that they have taken a position on some primaries, and there's a little bit of controversy about that.
Yeah. I mean, basically, they're backing more traditional candidates. But I mean, what we're seeing, when we had the individual numbers being released, is that Democrats are really doing well, and Republicans aren't doing as well in general as far as raising money, to individual campaigns. And so, yeah, like I said, like this Michael Levin, I really don't know that much about him, but I know that Applegate was a Bernie supporter. And, like I said, he came extremely close. And so, I mean, we'll just have to see, in general. I mean, overall, we're seeing, a tremendous amount of money being raised by Democrats. And so, I mean, I think that's, generally good. I'd like to obviously see, larger leads, but 11 points isn't bad as far as an improvement ratio. So I'm pretty happy with that. Not happy with like the Costello race in Pennsylvania 6th, or the Mike Kaufman race in Colorado 6th, where they have leads. But I mean, it's still obviously a long way to go.
Yep.
So, but I mean, like a few weeks ago when I called back, we were talking about the DNC wasn't raising a lot of money, and I said it's because people are giving to individual candidates,
and that appears to be what's happening.
Absolutely, and so I think people are pretty fired up about it, and I mean, everybody wants Trump out and at least have a check on him, and so we'll see from there. And like I said, I mean, and we have other people like this guy John Heenan from the Montana at large race, who's raising a lot of money, and he's probably the favorite.
What do you think the chances are in the Senate? Bad,
they're pretty
right?
low.
They're pretty low.
Yeah, because I mean, right now we have
23 to
McCaskill,
right?
Yeah, I mean, McCaskill's down in polling, Heitkamp's down in polling, Sherrod Brown's down in polling. In a hypothetical, Bill Nelson is down against Rick Scott. Those are two Republican-based polls, but I mean, they're pretty close to margin of errors. But I mean, it's just not good when you have 4 or 5 races that are that close, and we haven't even seen any polling in the Tester race in Montana or in the Donnelly race in Indiana. So I mean, even if they win in Arizona and Nevada and possibly even Texas, in a real wild shot, if McDaniel wins in Mississippi, a Democrat could win that state. But I mean, it's going to be hard if they don't hold the states.
Right.
But then again, that's just the polling data is bad. But I mean, a lot of the experts, the traditional experts, are still saying Sherrod Brown's probably still going to win. Manchin will probably win. So we'll just have to see as time goes on as far as the other races. We'll get more polling data out. One other thing about, after Trump was elected, I said that his approval rating would go into the 20s within 6 months. You said I was wrong. He'll hold on to his base. You were right. I also said the ACA would not be repealed, and you said I might be right, and so far that's held up. Now we have to deal with the tax cuts for the rich. How do you evaluate the left strategy towards fighting against these awful tax cuts for the rich?
I would. I mean, I think I think it's really just promoting and blowing the lid off of stuff like the estate tax. I mean, it's very hard to know right now what's there, right? The difficulty the Republicans are going to have in passing this is that whatever they use to offset is going to hurt one specific narrow subset of their coalition, right? So they wanted to do that SALT stuff, the state and local taxes deductions thing, but then California and New York delegations were like, if you do that, you will have no Republican congresspeople in either one of those states. They just will not exist. It'll be gone. Forget about it. And so that seems to be off the table. They're not going to do the mortgage interest deduction. They're not going to go after that. I think the estate tax, they can work on it. And I'll talk a little bit about the estate tax. The understanding of the estate tax is so poorly misunderstood in this country. It is shocking. There was a poll out by Huffington Post, and I'll go through this later, but showed like a 30-point swing when people understood who was actually impacted by the estate tax. And that's just going to, so stuff like that suggests to me that the only thing that the left can do to stop this is to figure out ways of educating people about it. And then the only other thing that can happen is that there must be a way, and I don't know who does this. I don't know if it's like Chuck Schumer or whomever, to keep Manchin, Donnelly, and Heitkamp in the fold. And maybe that means like attempt to help them get reelected so that their numbers are up, right? I mean, because here's the dynamic. People are pissed because you're not going after Joe Manchin. If Joe Manchin thinks that the last thing that Joe Manchin is going to do is tack to the left right now. And if Joe Manchin thinks he's going to lose, he is going to vote for that tax cut. And so that's just the reality of it. It doesn't mean that I like Joe Manchin. Doesn't mean that all the checks that Joe Manchin sends me is having any impact on what I'm saying. It is just simply a political dynamic. Now, there's a lot of people out there like, it doesn't matter. But preventing them from doing these tax cuts, and remember, these aren't just the tax cuts, right? I mean, this whole tax cut bill is also wrapped up in massive cuts to the social safety net and our social insurance programs because they have to offset. Preventing that from happening has both political and policy implications that are crucial. So much more important than disciplining Joe Manchin beyond his the goal is to make sure that it doesn't break from the Democratic caucus. And I'm not just talking about Manchin. I'm talking about Heitkamp. I'm talking about Donnelly, too.
Heitkamp. John, is there any predictions that you'd like to lay down about how this tax thing is going to play out that will make you look good and Sam look bad in a couple of months?
No, I think we're both want the same thing. So, yeah, I'm not...
well, I think you usually want the same thing, but I think that you usually maybe are a little bit more astute about how to get it and how it will play out.
I think if I'm not mistaken, what John was saying before we went into that about the tax deal was that I was 1.5% right and John was 0.5% right. And I think that's fine. Right?
I think that was quite the opposite of what he was saying.
Wasn't that what you were saying?
I think that was quite the opposite. I think
no, he said I was right about the base.
No, I think
and we were both right about the healthcare.
I think, if I may, I think what John was saying, anytime, anywhere, any place, Sam, I'll fucking lay you out.
John, don't let him speak for you like that.
Okay.
I represent John.
Yeah, and I'm not sure about the Manchin thing because it only needs 50 votes. So why are you putting the emphasis on Manchin? I know what you can probably say this because if one of them they don't hold their caucus.
If Manchin votes, right? If Manchin votes for this, if Manchin signals he's going to vote for it, what Republican won't?
That's a good point.
All right,
that's a good point. But I mean,
the Manchin, one of the Democrats is the sheepdog. And once one of the Democrats says, I can vote for this, then every Republican is allowed, it's a free vote for every Republican. A free vote for every Republican. Nobody has any hesitation vote for it if a Democrat votes for it. It's a bipartisan bill. Why wouldn't I be bipartisan? That is, you put the pressure. It takes the pressure off of Collins. It takes the pressure off of Murkowski. It takes the pressure off of, I don't know who else would be in play in the Republican Party. Corker, maybe. I don't know. He's going to vote for it. But in the end,
he's gonna give a floor speech about how Trump is destroying society before he votes for it.
But maybe John McCain.
I think McCain is very much trending towards voting against it. He can also loop it back to voting against the Bush tax cuts.
Yeah, there's a lot of things he can do.
Anytime he's personally offended, he can be like a positive force for the country.
Exactly.
Well, you know what made me think of it though was yesterday I played a clip of him saying that it was wrong that in Vietnam that there was a class disparity in drafting people to go. And I just think that when he starts talking like that in the context of his broader push, that sounds to me like a vote against regressive tax cuts.
There's so many different provisions that could set off that could lose a vote or two here, but the main thrust of the argument is these are tax cuts for the rich. And then there's a lot lost. But I appreciate the call, John. We'll see. I know you'll hold it to me. I know not only will you hold it to it, but you'll be able to call back in 6 months and tell me at what time during this specific show.
Precision.
I said that, whatever I said.
It's about 106 Eastern, and you did not call it correctly, Sam.
And Jamie and Brendan are learning the precision in which John from San Antonio. Yeah, I feel like you missed sort of like the golden years where John would just call in and say, because he didn't call as often. So it would be like, Sam, I don't know if you recall, but 8 months ago, it was a Tuesday, you were talking about this and you said this, and he would quote me back to me. All right, so wait a second.
You'd be like,
so I get this story.
And
I get this story about I don't know when this was from, but I follow this woman who has this model alliance. I think because she was on Up with Chris. I'm not sure how she's in my timeline, and apparently she started reprinting stuff about Terry Richardson because I didn't know anything. I followed this and you had mentioned it. Who is Terry Richardson? How did you come to work with Terry Richardson?
Well, for a time, he was probably the most famous fashion photographer in the world. And he also did other kinds of photography. And I first met him at a party for SuicideGirls.com back in 2003, I believe.
All right, so
2004.
So Jamie meets this now. Wait, what is SuicideGirls.com? What was that? Was that a website?
It was and is a website. It's sort of a social network / pinup, alternative pinup site.
Okay.
It's very aughts.
Very totally aughts. I mean, that's the thing is that during the aughts, I was already in the teens, and so I zoomed past that.
Okay.
I didn't pick up on it. Apparently, it was a big thing, and I didn't know about it. All right, so you meet this guy, and he says like, you got to model for me.
Yeah, I mean, he took some pictures of me at the party, just looking cute or whatever, and I was like pretty stoked on all of it because I was 19. I might have even been 18 at the time of this party. I got to check the date.
And you knew him at the time? Like, you were aware of his reputation at the time?
No, not really. I was more into Suicide Girls than him.
And so he says what? He says, come model for me, or?
Yeah, he had his assistant get my information.
He travels around with his assistant? Was that happening? Like, was he at the party professionally?
Yeah,
or?
yeah. It was this like very, very Y2K era thing in Williamsburg, where in what's probably like a fucking hotel now, but they had it set up so they were doing some shooting in half of the building. It was in this warehouse, and they had a live feed so the people in the party could watch. It was very
That is so that.
It was very panoptic, Peaches on the stereo.
Yeah, I don't want to get into Peaches right now. But, all right, and so then what happened?
Well, his assistant got in touch with me and asked me to come to his studio for a shoot. and they were going to pay me with a signed print. And I looked it up, and that was worth money. And I had been doing a little bit of naked internet modeling here and there for a little extra pocket change in college. So I thought it would be a cool thing to do.
Okay, so you're going to, and they're just going to pay you in
a print, a signed print.
Is that common?
Wow.
I don't know.
Right. I mean,
wait, that's okay.
All right, so you go there, and
it was a bad deal.
Well, I mean, it sounds like a bad deal, but I can also understand like a 19-year-old. Like,
Right.
I mean, I think I drove a car down and back from Florida for like $250, and I thought I was the richest guy in the world.
I just fucking nailed it.
I just nailed it.
I just got an incredible deal.
And
I'm going
they
to
gave me
Jacksonville.
$20 to eat during the whole time.
I
All
even
I
had
need
a-
is one
Wow.
bag of like of
I have an expense account for Jolly
chocolate
Ranchers.
coffee beans, and I could get that for like $12. I'm gonna pocket the other 13. All right, so so you go there, and what happens? Is the assistant there? How does this work?
Yeah, I mean, I should also say that I looked him up a little bit, and
he was a legit photographer.
He was legit. He was pretty well known.
Yeah,
and
not only legit, very well known, right? Like
yeah,
maybe even the
he
most
was-
At that time,
he
dude?
was cool. He was in with all the cool people that I thought were cool at the time.
Like what brands was he?
Like Vice.
Right.
Very heavily associated with the Vice of that time period. Not so much anymore.
Okay, so you go, and what happens?
Well, this is an excellent question because the way I've been telling this story for years and years, I just found out is wrong. According to my original story, I went there to model for him twice, and he only got fresh the second time. But a reporter from New York Magazine recently sent me some pictures that prove he at least got grabby with me in the first session as well, which is
Wow.
something I completely blocked out of my memory.
Wait a second. So why are there pictures of him being grabby of you? I don't understand.
Because that's his thing. Like, I didn't really realize this at the time.
He puts himself in the pictures?
Yeah, like this info was not publicly available before I started talking about it. But yeah, that's kind of his thing. He invites young, naive girls. Some of them are fashion models, some of them are not, to shoot in his studio. And it's got this aura of professionalism because his assistants are standing around, and just kind of gets naked and tries to see what he can get them to do on camera.
He gets naked too?
Yeah, a lot of the time.
Sort of sounds like the stories that came out about the American Apparel guy, actually.
They're very similar.
Similar stories.
They're basically the same
I mean, it's
person.
like same generation, same mentality, same harassment stories,
Okay.
same aughts thing.
Same look.
Same look. Yeah.
So
Oh, I
you
don't
do
know,
the
it's very
first
recent.
one, and do you remember what your attitude must have been? Did you block it out, or was it like you just assumed that this was normal and that you've just got to, this is what it takes to be in this business or something? Is that what you were trying to do, be in that business, the modeling business?
Well, no, I was never trying to be a fashion model. I'm 5'4". I'm not delusional.
Okay, well, I don't know what the parameters are for
But
that,
I was like a naked girl for hire. I did Suicide Girls. I did some other stuff, and I assumed that this would help me get more work and more money for my work.
And so they asked you back, is that it? And does he get more creepy at that one, even more?
Yeah. I mean, just to recap a little bit of the story, what did he ask me to do first? And I will say that he definitely benefited from my naivete and that like 19-year-old.
Well, that's why you go after a 19-year-old too.
And that 19-year-old belief that you're like smart enough to navigate this world and get what you want out of it without having someone get one over on you, which I don't know if anyone possibly could be.
Right.
So anyway, let's see. I asked to keep my underwear on because I had my period, and he wanted to make tea with my tampon, and I was like, ew, no. And yeah. And the whole time he's got this like really sort of ghoulishly upbeat attitude, like, I love tampons. Oh, this is so much fun. And everyone around him is like, oh yeah, this is so fun. Aren't you having so much fun? And I'm like, yeah.
So wait, there are people around?
Yeah.
Like, are they?
They're taking most of the pictures too, by the way.
So wait a second. How many people are there, and who are they?
There was this one guy named Keiichi who was a Japanese photographer, I believe, and this woman named Leslie Lesson who is a stylist, and her role in most of this seems to be to make the girls feel safe and do damage control afterwards and make sure that they're not gonna make any trouble. So,
and have any of these people spoken out after, because you wrote about this, and then it's sort of all like.
I mean, I should finish the story.
Okay, sorry.
Get to the main event, which is he somehow. I mean, he requested a hand job and he received a hand job, and to this day, I don't really know why I did that, and I felt really embarrassed about it for a long time, which is why I didn't tell anyone for a really long time.
Right.
But in retrospect, yeah, there was coercion involved. He dropped a bunch of names. And
is this in front of everybody in the studio?
Yeah. Yeah, and everyone's acting like this is so cool, and if you say no, you're like, you hate fun. You're like a fucking buzzkill.
Jesus. And this, and so what happened? So how many years later do you write about this?
Okay, I was 19 when it happened, and I was 25 when I wrote about it, so 6 years.
And so you were the first person to sort of like expose this guy, right?
Yeah, I mean, I had an inkling that it wasn't just to me.
Right.
Like, I figured he probably did it with a lot of other people, both fashion models who were directly coming to him for work and randos like me who were coming across him for various reasons. So my friend Jennifer was working at this women's site called The Gloss, and she wrote a post about it after the model Ree Rasmussen accused him of stuff she'd heard secondhand. And Jennifer wrote a post like, well, until an actual model comes forward and says, I felt bad about it, there's really nothing anyone can figure out about it. And I was like, well, come to think of it, this is an experience that I had. And like,
wow. Did she know that you had a history with that guy?
No.
Oh, wow.
She didn't. And like, I didn't think anyone was going to care, or I probably would have tried to get more money for this story or like a bigger byline, but I wanted to get it out there for myself. Right. I had no idea that anyone was going to care. And like, a lot of people didn't care at the time.
And so after this, was there like a flood of stuff that came out? What came out in the wake of this?
Well, not right away. At first it was just me, and I was like I got it out. Like, once I get an idea in my head to do something, I have to do it or I feel bad inside. So I didn't even think that hard about it. I think I just did it.
And in one sense, and I think you reference it in the piece, that you're not a model. So, I mean, you're not in this, you didn't feel like you were in this business as much.
No,
so you didn't have to worry about like your career, I guess.
Yeah, and people have used that against me to say like, well, you know, why'd you do it if you weren't trying to be a fashion model? But like, this is the only reason I've been able to talk about it.
Why'd you do it if you weren't trying to be a So what if you were trying to be a fashion model? What difference does that make?
Well, I guess the argument is that his coercive power is stronger over someone who's like
a non-professional
in debt to their agency. I don't know. It's bullshit.
Yeah. Weird.
Very weird.
Yeah. Well, people have said a lot of different things about it to me over the years.
So, and then it started coming out more and more years later from other models?
Yeah. At first, there was really almost nobody backed me up at the time. One of the only people who did was Tavi Gevinson. I think she was like 12 years old.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah. So, you know, good for her. And I was like, oh shit, like, what did I do? Like, I was freelancing for Vice at the time, and my relationship with Vice was over for about 5 years after that. And I heard from people that I thought were my friends. And
why? What happened at Vice? Like, who are they? Was it people were friends with him or something?
It was a very different publication than it is today.
Right.
I'll just say. And the editor-in-chief was...
Who was that?
Good friends with him, Jesse Pearson.
Okay.
So I don't want to make any accusations that are going to get me sued, but the writing was on the wall. I have
Well, you don't have to say that it
idea
was because
what
of
happened.
anything. It's just like you had a good relationship with Vice. They were friends. Then all of a sudden you didn't have a good relationship with Vice.
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't, maybe that was just completely coincidental.
Yeah, sure.
It's definitely possible, as is, the chances it's also possible we're going to get hit by a comet. I'm not saying that these have the same possibilities. I'm not a math person, but it is...
None of us are
lesson
math
in
people.
probabilities.
We're very opposed to
Probabilities.
math on this show, in fact.
So, okay. So, and then did you get, when people started coming out, did you ever hear from other women who went through this, who said, thank you for doing that? Or...
Yeah, I did, actually. It's been kind of nice. At first I was like, what the fuck did I do? I've ruined my career. I'm going to be associated with him for the rest of my life, and no one's going to want to hire me to do anything. But since then, a lot of other women have come out with their own stories, and it's been very validating for me. And I actually have been in contact with Charlotte Waters, who came out a few years ago with a nearly identical story about him. She was an art school student at the time. She was another sort of random person that he impressed with his oeuvre and his influence or whatever, and did what pretty much sounds like a borderline assault in his shoot with her. But none of this stuff is technically illegal, although some of the things probably qualify. I should also make the point that there's no law against sexually harassing an independent contractor, and that's what most models are classified as.
Interesting.
Only in some states do they have protection against sexual harassment.
Wow. Well, sorry you had to go through that, but good for you for blowing the whistle on that. Dude seems like a total creep and asshole.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't feel good about what happened, obviously, and I've felt really embarrassed and guilty about it through the years, but I think I've come to a place where I feel good about how I've handled it since then.
What was the the guilt? What did you feel like? Why guilty? Like guilty that you had hurt him in some way, or guilty that you, what was it?
I mean, I had a lot of people saying oh, well, you could have said no. If you were traumatized by this, you did this to yourself. And I get where they're coming from, kind of, but also if I were him, and I'm not, but any reasonable good person, if they hook up with someone, even let's say he thinks that it's fully consensual and he's really as naive as he pretends to be about how coercion works, which I don't believe for fucking second, because he's not out there doing this stuff to Kate Moss. But
Right.
even if he was, if I hooked up with someone and I thought that they had a good time, and then afterwards I found out this person had PTSD from it and had completely dissociated from their memory, a good person would be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. How can I prevent this from happening in the future?
Right.
But he's never going to do that.
Did you ever contact him afterwards? Did he have an opportunity to hear from you that you were upset about that, or to hear from
No.
other people? No.
I moved on. I never collected my print. I just wanted to forget about it.
That is an indication. Why didn't she come get her print? Everything went great.
Yeah, and it's not like I was a prude either. Not that it matters, but I had modeled for photographers before, and I had had casual sex before, and this felt very different to me.
Seems to me a guy who's doing that would have very specific ground rules of need to be professional. There needs to be literally signatures, and I need to be able to sit down with you beforehand because this is my method. And
yeah, you really want to err on the side of caution,
right?
when you're doing anything like that.
Yeah,
like,
it sounds
even
like
in,
bullshit.
In pornography, like there is a
Right.
list of things that you'll do and you won't do, and you discuss it beforehand, and different things get more money. And he could, if he wanted to, he could go out and find people who are comfortable with doing pornographic stuff on camera. There are a lot of them, but I think he gets off on violating people's boundaries and getting them to do stuff that they don't necessarily want to do.
Right. And I think if that was his method, he wouldn't get like the type of shoots with like Senator Obama's coming in. If he was like, I don't know, maybe he would, but he
did pictures
shot
with
a picture
Obama.
of Senator Obama.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
No, he was a high profile guy. And I think that's exactly it. Yeah, it's definitely, there's no like misdirected sense of like edginess. Like, yeah, he specifically liked violating people. That was like all the accounts that
It's
came
all
out.
spontaneous. It's all fun. Isn't this fun?
Right.
And like, I also want to say, like, in the course of writing about this stuff, like, it was never my mission to destroy him. Like, if anything, I just want him to think a little bit more about what he's doing and stop. The main thing is I wanted him to stop.
Did you get public criticism from it?
I mean, yeah, I got all kinds of nasty comments from people. I got nasty comments from people I thought were my friends.
Did they like I don't understand like the logic of somebody saying like it's cool what he's doing, but what you're doing is not cool. Like, I mean, if it's like, okay, that's just the way, that's his process, but your process, which involves just writing about what actually happened, is somehow problematic.
Yeah, I mean,
that's even giving the benefit of the doubt to those people.
Yeah, I mean, I guess their thinking is, you knew what you were getting into. You did this to yourself, like you've.
He
no
knew
right
what
to
he was
complain
getting
about
into.
it.
It's not like he thought that you didn't have. You know what I mean? Like it's one thing for, and I don't think it's appropriate, but I'm just saying, like, if someone has that logic of like, look, he's an artist, and you were involved in the process, and you had the ability to, say a safe word at any point during that process. But he also consented to, with a live person, to have them talk about the experience and to interpret it, and probably gave more, just as explicit consent to that as anything you're doing, and you're not, and he doesn't have to do anything at that point. He's already done it.
I'm glad you brought that up. I think the defense of it's art is something he and others have used a lot over the years to try to muddy the waters around issues of consent. Just because it's art doesn't make it magically exempt from the rules of human ethics.
Yeah. That I've always
this came up in the
very problematic.
Brando movie. I mean, I forgot that story, but we talked about it a long time ago. That really, I shouldn't have brought it up because I cannot remember the name of it, but there was some infamous Brando movie that in the 70s.
Tango.
Last Tango in Paris, I think, which is actually a pretty terrible movie in my view. It's very overrated, but regardless, that's irrelevant. It came out that there was a scene that essentially they like pre-planned an assault on the actress in it. And the whole spin around it was like, well, this will be a spontaneous reaction. It's art.
Like, even if that
it's fucking nonsense. You can't do it.
Even if it makes the best art in the world, like, that doesn't make it okay.
Right.
Well, yeah, and also it's also just, to me, I mean, maybe this is just my way of thinking. It's like obviously just it's concocted. It's nonsense. I don't even take that at face value. It wouldn't be justified in and of itself, but I don't even buy it to begin with.
I mean, I think it's possible they bought it, but that's so what?
Yeah,
I mean,
of course,
it's just
of course,
so what?
Of course.
It's just,
of course.
I'm sure there are serial killers out there who are like,
ISIS should say they're artists.
It's folk art for me to skin these people and put them on, wear them on, or whatever it is.
What are you watching, that new Netflix show or something?
No,
Jesus.
but my point is that like you don't get a pass. It doesn't matter how you justify it to yourself. You just don't get a pass.
Well, he has gotten a pass for many years from a lot of people. And I think the fashion industry is especially immune to any kind of shame or introspection. But that finally seems to be changing.
Somebody just IM'd and said that we should be putting you on screen. We don't have the Well, first of all, Jamie's in charge of who's on screen at any given time. But we don't have that third camera set up, right?
I didn't know it was here yet.
Well, it came last week.
Oh.
What?
But we will put it up.
What?
We'll do it again if Jamie. But Jamie's more conscious of that than anybody. That's her job. She is in charge of the switcher.
I'll put myself on screen.
It's a very powerful position.
We'll put. We could try and run that one, I guess. This one right here in front of me, that little web thing with literally that is taped onto a stick. All right. Well, it came up today. Jamie came in and said that she'd gotten.
I also think it's really interesting what you said, like in terms of a perspective, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that like, say this started coming out several years ago and he said, oh, like I stand corrected here. Let's talk. Let's figure this out. I seriously fucked up. There might have been a road to like it not ending in him being banned from Condé Nast.
Yeah, like that's all I ever wanted
Right.
from any of this.
I just think that's a really important point because part of what happens in these stories is people's like like one of the kind of like diversions is that, oh, this is just about destroying people's careers. And I don't read that from, I first and foremost, it's like exposing dangerous behavior. And then it's like, we've talked about it. You're writing with the intention of like just shifting behavior.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like on a very practical
very
level.
practical
I want
stuff.
to solve
Right.
the immediate problem of
Right.
him molesting human beings who are just trying to
And
do
what's
their
funny
jobs.
is that thing with Ben Affleck that came out, and it was like, it was like a smaller thing on a relative scale, but an actress said like, he grabbed me in 2003, and he just responded in a tweet, and he was like, "You're right, I apologize, correct," and then that was it. Like the story didn't keep bubbling because he was like, correct.
Well, also,
Yeah.
just even, you see this, I think, just with assholes in general, and you can divine intent after these moments. It's one thing for Donald Trump not to have the acumen to console someone whose son has died in the military. It's another to come out the next day and say, like, it's her problem.
There's degrees to these things. Anybody could fuck up in a call, but not everybody can say, "I don't care." I hope your husband's last meal was fried chicken. Do they have that in Niger?
All right, let's go to, and there was a piece by Alex McGill, and I've been trying to get him. I don't know why that's not doable, but on what Ben Carson has been up to at HUD. And I just recently ran into a guy who works as a housing lawyer. And he said that already there's been shifted funds away from providing legal representation for people in these instances. And here is a clip of Representative Al Green from Houston, Texas. This is the House Financial Services Committee meeting. This took place yesterday. And I would imagine, among other things, just generally, as a congressman, you want to know some things about what's happening with HUD because you have people in your district who rely on HUD services in one form or another. Also, I would imagine in the wake of the hurricane season there, that becomes even more acute. Here's Ben Carson, who not only comes into this hearing like woefully unprepared, and we can talk about why that's the case after the fact, but also incapable of conceding even in the most benign way that he's unprepared, right? Like you can come in and say like, that's a good question, sir. I'm going to get back to you on that. But he won't even say that because he's so arrogant.
Dr. Carson, sir, you have indicated that there will be substantial cuts to the budget that HUD has. Can you give me that dollar amount? I'm showing that it's about $6 billion. Is that correct?
That's about right.
Is that about 13% of the budget?
Yes.
And will these cuts, Mr. Carson, come from public housing, housing vouchers, community development block grants, and other aid to low-income persons?
They come from a variety of sources, including...
How much from public housing, Mr. Carson?
Probably in the neighborhood of, if you combine all the programs, 2 to 3 billion.
2 to 3 billion.
Ballpark.
How much from housing vouchers, Mr. Carson?
Rather than go through a quiz on all the numbers...
It's not a quiz, Mr. Carson. I have the time to ask you questions about things that you should have some knowledge of. If you have no knowledge of them, you can simply say so. I'll accept it as an answer. But this is something that's within your bailiwick, my dear sir. How much from housing vouchers?
Again, I can give you that number, but...
Well, if you would give it to me, I would greatly appreciate it, because I'd like to go on to community development block grants.
Well, here's my point. I agree with you that it's difficult to do these things.
That has little to do with my question. You're answering a question that I'm not asking, to be quite candid with you. So would you kindly tell me how much HUD how much you're going to cut from the HUD budget?
Pause it for 1
to
second.
housing?
I mean, you know what occurs to me during the middle of this, where you're asking the secretary of a department, you're cutting your budget by almost 15%. In fact, I don't know if I question whether or not Ben Carson even knew that. Because it was Al Green who said to him, "You're cutting your budget by $6 billion." Is that right? Yeah.
I like your
And that's
music, but I
13%.
don't like your congressionalism.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, thereabouts.
But what
Ballpark it.
this reminds me of is when someone like Rick Perry says we need to cut 3 agencies. This one, that one, and I can't remember the third. And the idea is that there's no thought going into this. There's no strategy. There's no policy. There's no, like, this is wasteful or that. This is just, these people don't care.
Well, agree to disagree. Mr. Bannon said he wanted to bring back bum fighting in a big way. Maybe that's strategy.
The bottom line is they might as well just say, like, you know what we did? We lit 7 buildings on fire. And whichever ones burned to the ground are the ones we didn't need. That's basically it.
More money we come from, more problems we see.
Keep playing this.
How much you're going to cut from the HUD budget as it relates to housing vouchers. Now, if you don't know, it's okay to say you don't know, Mr. Carson. I don't hold you to things that you don't know. How much are they going to cut?
Let's just move on and say that I don't want to offer a number because it's subject.
Why would the Secretary of HUD not give the number, the amount that you're cutting from housing vouchers, Mr. Carson? Because you're the Secretary of HUD.
Because
you're making the cut.
Because we've already talked about the total amount of the cuts.
Well, the total amount does not help me when it comes to the housing vouchers. I have people who use housing vouchers, and I need to be able to explain to them, Mr. Carson.
I mean, just contemplate for a moment. If Ben Carson's in there and he's doing brain surgery, and the hospital administrator comes down and says, "Hey, I just want you to know, we're cutting 5 to 10, 15% out of the surgery budget." And Carson's like, "Well, wait, did you cut scalpels?" Look, we don't need to get into specifics. Well, wait a second. Am I going to need? Do you have the machine that sucks all the extra blood out? Well, you'll find out when you get in there. I mean, I'm telling you, 15%. That's what we did. We cut the surgical budget. Maybe it was administrative staff. Maybe it was essential tools that you need when you go in there. No, you're going to find out.
Well, first of all, fuck you, Sam.
This guy didn't know anything. And you know what it's indicative of is that this is their game plan. It is total deconstruction of the administrative state in a haphazard manner because it doesn't matter to them. There is no strategy. They just don't believe it should exist. His staffers didn't even say, "Hey, man, look, here's a sheet of paper." The one thing that your job is at this point is knowing what is being cut. That's it. That is literally the only job he has. And they didn't even give him a piece of paper that said, like, 10% here, 12% here. Like, who would do this? Who would it not even occur to when you're going in to meet with Congress? Like, we're making 13% cuts, right? Can you give me just a breakdown of how that comes out? Like, how does that question not come up?
Guys, I think I got this. Al Green's a pretty good singer, but he's a dumb congressman. I think I'll take care of this. Let's just agree to disagree.
It's almost like they didn't even know that he was there. That like he was like, you know what? They told me we were going to lunch. I didn't realize we were stopping here.
Wait, why did not everybody tell me? Okay, I'll answer it. I think you got the right ballpark. $6 billion.
It's insane.
Whatever. It's
all right.
I mean,
speaking also of insane,
state of
we'll get
mind.
into Gorka in a minute. We'll get there. Oh yeah.
Check your IMs.
Let's see.
It might have been funny for a second if you checked it, but your timing was off.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Oh.
Let's just agree to move on.
Yeah, we'll do that.
It would have been funny though.
I was going to ask you. I should announce. Michael has announced this morning that he will not be here on Thursday and Friday.
That's correct.
As part of what is this? What is this like program that you're on now? Is this like
I'm taking back control of my time as a worker.
I see that.
From
This
the
is a
boss.
very interesting dynamic.
From the exploiter petty bourgeoisie that is you.
I had people last week in Vegas were like, what's going on with Michael? Is he leaving the show? And I'm like, not that I'm aware of. Why? He hasn't been on at all this past month. And I'm like, oh no, that's because he's on this new program that I'm instituting, which is like
where you actually respect workers' rights all of a sudden. That's great. Maybe you give us health care.
That is, I think when you don't actually show up, you're not really a worker anymore. You're just it's like a we work situation here where I don't collect. You just show up.
It's a we work where you pay me to do impressions. I like it. That should be the future of work.
Yes, it is. It's pretty.
But anyways, let's just agree to move on. Let's just you say 50% of vacation time. I say it's in that ballpark with no specifics. So let's just move on.
It's not. Yeah, no. I don't even need to do the breakdown.
You say we work. I say I'm on the show.
So we do have a new
impressions.
policy, Jamie. I'm not sure if you're aware of this. That when you're going to unilaterally decide that you're going on vacation on random days, you need to email me
afterwards.
No.
Don't do it before.
Well, no. There's also a retrospective. The trailing 30 days is also important too.
But I haven't agreed. I haven't agreed to that part of it because emails are very taxing, and it might get involved in front of my supplement regime.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh,
I just booked a ticket to Aruba for January. See you January 20th, Sam.
Where is the audio that I was going to play? I'm going to dig that up.
Tomato.
Well,
let's just agree to move on.
Calling from a 478 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Howdy there, Sam. It's everyone's favorite aspiring character actor, non-Michael Brooks category. It's Jeff in Georgia, y'all. How you doing?
Well, Jeff, I realize the one thing you do have going for you is that you actually show up consistently, and so that is good. What is up?
Oh, blow me, Sam.
Try gear every week, man. Hey, just real quick, for y'all folks listening who are also aspiring character actors, just a small piece of advice. You really need to commit to your character. I, for example, drank 3 beers for breakfast this morning and listened to the theme of Dukes of Hazzard no less than 4 times.
Well,
so make sure you prepare when you call in. I know for a fact that the guy who does the mooch has seen every episode of The Sopranos at least half a dozen times.
Well, it's a very good point. There's really two rules in show business. One is show up. And the second
show up in a certain sense.
Know your lines, and that's it. So your commitment is well appreciated.
Yes, indeed, Sam. I appreciate you and all that. I prepare for the best, and I serve the best. But Sam, I'm calling to highlight an issue that doesn't receive a lot of coverage either in the mainstream media or, frankly, on your show. If you know me in the league of extraordinarily progressive Southern gentlemen, you know we're committed to socializing many aspects of our current society. Okay, like kind of finances, banking, energy, stuff like that. But today I want to talk about another industry. It's known as big air filter. Everyone has the right to breathe free, Sam. Will you join the league in calling for the nationalization of the air filter industry today?
I mean, it would be something I would contemplate. I'm not sure that this is something that the nation needs to get involved in. I'll go as far as the oil refineries, though.
There's a large amount of stolen Confederate gold bullion in it for you, son.
I would contemplate it. I would contemplate nationalizing the
Sam,
airfield industry.
It's great to talk to you, man. I can't keep that accent up for more than a couple minutes at a time.
Does it hurt your throat?
Dissident peasant, folks.
Yes.
Does it hurt? It hurts your throat.
Yeah,
right?
it's the distant peasant, y'all. How y'all doing? Hey, just real quick, if anyone's interested, I did a quick little 10-minute thing, a primer on talking to Republicans. I don't think I'm particularly very good at it necessarily. I've just had a lot of practice at it because I've lived in Georgia for a long time.
How uncomfortable
so
do
if
things
you're
get down there
interested-
for you? How uncomfortable do things get down there for you? I mean, what do you...
Honestly, there's a big generational divide, right? So the people of my age and younger that I hang out with in their late 20s, early 30s, they're far less conservative. Even the people of the same skin persuasion as yours truly. And there's also, a sizable African American community around here. So, I have people to talk to and socialize with. Some people you just can't get away from, and I think that's where a lot of the passion comes from when people talk about, convincing other people of your point of view. Because sometimes they're people you love, right, or people you're related to, or people you work with, and you otherwise just can't walk away from. So
Right.
I think contemplating how what to keep in mind when you talk to those people, if you decide that you must or you should or you have to, y'all can check that out on iTunes, Stitcher. It's all the usual places.
I will check
the
that
other
out.
thing I had for you, man, is last week Mindy asked really point blank, why does cable news suck so bad? And Michael's answer was fine. There was nothing wrong with it. I want to take a stab at it.
I'm going to say it was
because
good, actually.
What really sucks about it is pretty basic. There's no class analysis. Now, I'm not trying to project, but, a few years ago, class analysis to me meant dusty books with dudes with beards on the covers, right, named Marx and Lenin, who, I don't truck with that stuff. I don't know anybody who does. It's all nonsense, right? But it's not so complicated as that. Because a lack of class analysis means that they're totally disconnected from the reality that you or I or Mindy or anyone else who's living a regular old small folk type existence, right?
Sam and Mindy are both 1%ers.
Well, I mean, listen. One part of the problem. I mean, I think that's true. There's a very narrow brush that is applied in terms of analysis, and class is a big part of that brush that's missing. I would say the other thing that is very difficult right now is that the programming is it is really the functional equivalent of entertainment TV and, largely speaking, and sports. I mean, some shows are better than others, but I know for a fact that, what producers do is they look and see what other people are doing. And,
right.
and they take their cues from there and they just go for it. And it's not, there's no conspiracy other than those are the people who do well in that context. The people who don't do well are the people who come in and become seen as too emotionally invested in a specific take or type of analysis, and they get drummed out. And, it's very much a ratings game, and it's a function of ratings or perhaps who you have watching it at any given point. And even though I would say this, the ratings are misunderstood by people as its relationship to money. So, for instance, Morning Joe, right, for a long time, did not get very good ratings, but because most of the views came from basically Washington and the New York-Washington corridor, It could be sold to advertisers as you're talking to a specific group of people. Policymakers, people who are around policymakers, people who are around legislatures. You're impacting the narrative, the media narrative. So it's okay that it's 5 times smaller than our rival, because these are the people that are making a difference, and that's what the selling point is for this. And so ratings aren't always the thing. Sometimes they're trying to go for a specific demo or an argument that they have a certain demo. But the problem with largely speaking, with cable television is the problem with a lot of things, and that is unfettered capitalism. And there were mechanisms back in the day that essentially forced the profit out of news. Okay, there were mechanisms that were imposed by the government, and some of them were imposed by the networks themselves. News divisions, typically up until like 1980 or so, lost money for the network. Now, there was only 3 networks. News divisions lost money because it was a loss leader for them. It was a way of branding their network. And so they didn't make any money in news. They lost money in news. And I don't know what the requirement is now for national news. Obviously, cable, it's 100%. The news must drive 100% of the profits. And that is a problem. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have the government own the networks, but you can have the government impose certain requirements that would eliminate the profit news as a profit center. So things like,
right, because information should be, at least to a limited degree, a public good, right? We all own.
Well, and never mind information.
We should all own the infrastructure over which
the airwaves
information is
themselves.
carried.
The airwaves and all the land grants that are involved in running those cables to people's homes, it seems to me, is an argument that is that's the commons. And we're renting that out to these people to make profit off of, and so we can make restrictions on what they do. When I first got into radio in 2004, there was a slight attempt, I think it was Representative Louise Slaughter, to reimpose the Fairness Doctrine. And nobody would do it. No other radio hosts on the left were in favor of it because it would destroy our business model. Now, I didn't care about it as a business very much, and so maybe that's why it was easier for me to
say.
Well, maybe it didn't preclude me. I mean, I at that time in particular, I was like, I don't care. I mean, whatever.
I'm just messing with you, man.
But the idea is that if radio was forced to put a conservative talker and then a liberal talker and then a conservative talker and a liberal talker, it would ruin the business model. And you wouldn't be able to profit in the way that you profit now. And so that in and of itself, I was like, good, burn it down.
Right.
And you can do that. The FCC chairman at one point said television was a vast wasteland. God, man, can you imagine if that guy was reanimated today?
I have no idea.
He would light himself on fire.
Expletives would escape his lips. Yeah, exactly. He would jump off a fucking building first, too.
All right, dude.
Hey, man, I really appreciate the call, man. You guys have a good one. I'll get
Socialist pusswads complain about TV.
Oh, hey, one more thing. Jamie, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I don't want to act like I know you, but I know that couldn't have been easy to say or talk about. So I appreciate your courage and honesty. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening.
Dissident peasant.
Stop virtue signaling, pussy.
337. Calling from a 337 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, is this me?
It is you, I think.
Hey, how you doing, Sam? I just called. I'm Tyler calling from Louisiana.
Tyler, whatever you got to put, you got your whatever you switched on your phone, switch it back.
Okay, is this better?
That's so much better.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, there's just a few quick things. I'm calling from Louisiana, and I've been following the whole thing with the reform commission trying to
Yep.
Do something with superdelegates. And the only thing that I wanted to say about that is, although there's not, everybody who's as involved as we are in politics and listen on a daily, there were still 13 million people who voted for Bernie Sanders in the primary. So I think it would be very important for the Democratic Party to think about that when they're dealing with these things, because even though they may not know, all of the intricate things about politics, they still understand. Like superdelegates, that's an obvious thing. That's an obvious thing that was obviously an obstacle for Bernie Sanders. So those people will have those same thoughts on those things, and if nothing comes out of this, I think that would be a very bad thing for the Democratic Party. And secondly, the same thing that's occurring on the left with the emergence of podcasts and things and people getting engaged in politics on the left, it's happening within the black community. So you'll have a lot of black people who used to vote with the somewhat uniformity that won't be there in the future. And as time continues, you won't have that same ability to dupe people, with things like hot sauce or Bill coming in and
I like hot
playing
sauce.
the saxophone. Yeah, and Bill coming in and playing the saxophone.
Hey, what's up, brother?
I think I only say these things so that the Democratic Party could recognize this and say, okay, we need to actually be substantive. And if they aren't substantive, it's really I don't know, man. It's upsetting because we all know how great things could be, but if those things don't happen and people don't feel that they are a part of the process, I think that who knows,
Yeah, well, let me just say, I think, and one of the reasons why, and it just didn't happen, I wanted to get Nomi Const on because I was in Vegas, she was in Vegas doing that, involved in those DNC meetings. I wanted to get a sense from her. I have some questions that don't make sense to me, and then some other things about the DNC. It didn't happen, and I'm going to try and figure out a way of trying to make that happen in the near future. But there's a lot of stuff I think that the DNC is doing wrong, even from their logic. And I think Tom Perez was really good at the Department of Justice. He was not my first choice for chair of DNC for both the reasons that he has little, it seems to me, elected experience. Well, that's, I think, inarguable. But also I wanted Keith Ellison, who I don't think is, God's gift by any stretch, but is the people that would come in and have access to resources, I think would have been much better. I think they're making some mistakes. I don't know if it's as bad as it's been reported, frankly, in some areas, but I think they're making some mistakes. I think there needs to be.
Their fundraising is very bad.
Well, their fundraising's bad, but I think that's because people are just saying we're not going to fundraise to the DNC, which is fine. You fundraise to the DCCC, you fundraise directly to candidates, which I think is better because I don't think the DCCC is particularly great either. That is an entity, and the Senate version of it are both entities that need more reformation, it seems to me. The DNC could be a functioning, valuable entity. It is not. It is not that powerful. I mean, I don't think it's that powerful. I think it could be much more effective, and it's not. So there's an opportunity cost there. But people get caught up a little too much in the power of the DNC. The superdelegates, look, the superdelegates, they are signifiers, but they don't have any ability. Technically, they do. But the day that superdelegates votes against the candidate with more normally delegated delegates, is the day
Right,
the Democratic Party ends, and they know it. They know it.
I would also be on the lookout.
Right, but-
They're going to announce
that's what
something,
you're
I
saying,
bet,
right.
soon about superdelegates, would be my guess. They're going to do some type of tip
Well, they
in
were-
that direction.
They were talking about reforming it, like cutting back
They're
on the
gonna do
numbers or
something like
making
that.
who gets.
They'll definitely do something
gets
like that.
gets made on it. I mean, it's because, look, I happen to think that there should be some mechanism that if you have a candidate that wins all the primaries and then June comes around and then they get indicted for bribery, that there should be a mechanism for the party to get rid of them. I don't know what that mechanism is. Maybe all the party officials, maybe not the super, maybe all the delegates revote. I don't know what it is, but there should be some type of mechanism. I think.
And
I think. Look,
I'm sorry. My problem with superdelegates isn't them switching the vote at the end. It's more so of swaying opinion on who is viable and who's not at the beginning. And
Yes,
and
I agree.
that's the same thing with media.
But
and,
look-
and that's my main problem with superdelegates. And my thing about them not making a change with that is it's the most obvious thing. So if you don't have people who feel that they're part of the process and they feel that there's no hope, I think that can only hurt the Democratic Party. That's what I'm saying. It's not.
Yes.
to
Okay.
say
I
that
agree with you. Listen,
the-
I think as a way of signaling to all those people who voted for Bernie, hey, we're making some reform moves.
right.
I have to say, I think it's
Right.
an empty gesture, but fine. If it works with people, great. I just don't think that that the value of like this candidate is destined to win because the superdelegates already, before the first ballot is cast, have already whatever. That happened to Hillary Clinton. Obama overtook her, and they all switched. But with that said, what you're telling me about the African American community is good. And we had on the show back in 2012, I think it was Glenn Ford, who came out and said, black people who have been traditionally the most radical elements of the Democratic coalition, if you will, of the left, have been largely undercut or have been deactivated in many ways during the Obama administration. And and I think there's a certain inevitability that, particularly younger African Americans, like, frankly, just younger people in general, are going to become more and more radicalized
And
and
don't you
skeptical.
think with that dynamic that it might even be like, if there is still a major superdelegate presence in 2020, there's going to be a certain type of voter in the Democratic primary, by primarily young people across all racial and sexual boundaries, right? That's going to have the opposite effect on them. Like you talk about presetting, like superdelegates endorse somebody and they have a sense of inevitability. I think of a bunch of a bunch of delegates circling around some senator. That's going to have the opposite effect.
Right. People are going to vote against the establishment.
If I was working for Kamala Harris or one of these more establishment track candidates, I'd be saying, can you refrain from endorsing me, please?
Endorse me yet.
In fact, maybe you could put out like a critical tweet
That's why I'm saying,
about how I'm being too cavalier about Wall Street or something. I mean, that's the smart move.
Exactly. I mean, that's what I'm saying. At this point,
Yeah, that's a great point.
At this point, all the superdelegates are performative. I mean, they're really, it's signaling, it's nothing. It's meaningless. But that's the politics. All right, appreciate the call.
All right, thank you, guys.
All right, let's get to a couple of the.
We need to get to Gorka, man.
Yeah, we'll get to Gorka, but first, I want to do this. The Sinclair Media, we have been talking about this. I don't know what I think there's. I think it's still an open comment period, but I'm not even sure. Where Ajit Pai, the new head of the FCC, he was one of the commissioners. Now it is true. I think there were 2 or 3 Democrats who voted for this guy's nomination, but they had no ability to stop it, as you know, because there is a filibuster proof confirming executive appointees are filibuster proof. So largely meaningless. The most meaningful determinant as to why Ajit Pai is the commissioner is, of course, because Donald Trump, as opposed to Hillary Clinton, was appointed. This Ajit Pai is going to attack net neutrality. But one of the things they also did was they reinterpreted a rule that was supposedly supposed to recognize that UHF stations, and the fact that many of you don't even know what I'm talking about is indicative of why this is such BS. That UHF stations were not worth the same as VHF stations when applied to a limit of how much clearance you could have around the country for your television stations. UHF, you used to have to go and jerry-rig your rabbit ears so that as you're dialing into channel 38 or channel 27 or channel 56 or channel 22, that your rabbit ears, you had to stand there and then string some tin foil over it so you could get decent reception in because they had much smaller signals. Today, if there's a UHF channel, you don't know it's a UHF channel because it's just on your cable system. So the idea that that shouldn't count against the limit for how large of a media outlet you can have across the country. So now, 75%, I think it is, places in the country, you can get a Sinclair-owned television station telling you stuff, not be aware that this is a national outfit, not be aware that it is a right-wing outfit, not be aware that they made a deal with the Trump administration when it was still a campaign to give them more favorable coverage. Google it. Kushner was bragging about it in October. So here is the Sinclair affiliate in St. Louis. These are the ones who ran the documentary on Hillary Clinton. I think they were involved in Citizens United. I think it was, or maybe these are the Swift boaters. These guys were Swift boat documentary.
Yeah.
Here it is, Sinclair affiliate in St. Louis, trying to expose the Clinton uranium scandal, which has been ongoing for years, living only in the most fevered right-wing swamps and those swampy places that actually think they're on the left.
The final word, and there is a Russian dude in jail right now after being convicted of bribery. There is money being handed over to an American foundation, an American entity, and Vladimir Putin is perhaps stronger than ever on the world stage as a result of what was going on, and none of it involves Donald Trump or his campaign. No wonder we're not hearing much about the story of the big uranium deal. That's right, the media apparently is ignoring all of this, at least most of the media is, and my suggestion is because it involves President Obama, not President Trump. It involves Hillary Clinton, not President Trump. Eric Holder, not President Trump. You see, the deal here is, and there ought to be hearings on this, and hopefully there will be on this, because heaven knows we were hearing stories about Jim Comey and having hearings on that, and stories about this campaign collusion and hearings on that, but so far, no hearings on the big uranium deal that allowed Vladimir Putin to take over 20% of our uranium supplies. 20%. Now, why we're handing over uranium to a guy who apparently is one of our big mortal enemies, isn't that what the Democrats and all the people on the left call him, and the media and everything else? Because President Trump dares to say nice things or a nice thing about Putin, and suddenly he is a horrible person. But we're cutting deals with the guy, giving him 20% of our uranium, and there's not a little smattering of coverage on this story that could involve kickbacks to the Clinton Foundation, could involve some illegal activity on the part of some entities in the swamp, in the deep state, and could involve some really embarrassing details about how President Obama and Hillary Clinton operated. And yet there's nothing being reported. This is a huge story, and there will be some folks who are getting a hold of this in the media. But more importantly, we need our government, our elected representatives, to hold hearings on this once and for all and get to the bottom of it. Pay attention to the story here and maybe at Fox and maybe on Breitbart and maybe in the U.S. Senate, but you won't hear it anywhere else. So,
oh, that should be your first clue about why this is such BS. This is a story that came from the book Clinton Cash, which this guy Schweitzer, who worked with Bannon, propagated as real investigative journalism. The story, and you can find this debunked just about anywhere online, is about a mining company that was based in South Africa that merged with a Canadian company who sold 51% of its holdings to Russia's nuclear agency. When that happens, because it involved uranium, the State Department had to sign off on it. I think it was maybe in part owned by the United States. Hillary Clinton and about 12 other members of the cabinet, maybe it was 11, had to sign off on this deal that allowed Russia's nuclear agency to have a financial stake in a company. That uranium was not handed over to Putin. It is still where it always was. It's still, I think, in this country. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission.
It's even more dangerous.
Had a statement, yes. And this is back, I think, in, I'm not sure when this was. NRC's review of the transfer of control request determined that the U.S. subsidiaries will remain the licensees, will remain qualified to conduct the uranium recovery operations, and will continue to have the equipment, facilities, and procedures necessary to protect public health and safety and to minimize danger to life or property. The review also determined that the licensees will maintain adequate financial surety for eventual decommissioning of the sites. Neither Uranium One nor ARMZ holds an NRC export license, so no uranium produced at either facility may be exported. So they simply own a piece of the business, not the actual uranium. Now, in Clinton cash, it was made to believe that the Russians then also contributed to Hillary Clinton's, but the timing is way off.
Sure, just carry water. My wife's entire criminal enterprise.
So,
anybody needs to die behind this, Sam? You have no ethics.
All you need to do,
Seth Rich in the eye. You shot him in
look
the
at
face.
Snopes, look anywhere to get this debunked. But the point of this is not to debunk this thing because it's just going to keep going on. The point of it is to let you know when you wonder why there is a significant portion of this country that believes fantasy and ridiculousness, you just witness it. Because their local television station is essentially the functional equivalent of the Rush Limbaugh show.
Literally telling them to go to Breitbart and Fox News.
Unbelievable.
As far as I'm concerned, if white people want to trade uranium with each other, fine. Play around with uranium, devils. Back to the caves. Light the snow caps up.
Speaking of
inbred, pig grafted, pork eating, incest ridden swine. I'm beside myself.
Now, there was a Sinclair Media, again, held a town hall on guns. And of course, who would you invite to talk about this? Well, an expert in guns. The guy who
Dad knew a lot about guns. He was
My father
not
was
a communist.
not a communist. Seb Gorka shows up on this debate, and he is making a point about guns. And look, can you guess what city he wants to talk about?
It's in the Midwest.
And can you guess about what type of folks he wants to reference? Well, you'll never guess how he refers to them. Here we go.
They are the anomaly. You do not make legislation out of outliers. Our big issue is black African gun crime against black Africans. It is a tragedy. Go to Chicago, go to the cities run by Democrats for 40 years. Black young men are murdering each other by the bushel. This is a social issue. Allow the police to do their jobs and rebuild those societies. Legislation will not save lives.
I assume what he's talking about is African Americans, but
Yes.
that's not what you said. I couldn't figure out who these African
Americans.
Well, and it,
Yes, African American.
Yes, go to Chicago, Zaire. You will discover quickly what I am talking
I'm sorry. Did I say that out loud? Did I say black Africans?
The black Africans who must be managed in Rhodesia by a great leader like Ian Smith. Oh, am I on mic? Excuse me.
Oh, my.
Pardon me.
That's what I said. Black African Americans.
Black Africans, the soul of darkness, of blackness in Chicago, with their black skin and their
Did
black
I
hearts
mention
and their
black?
eyes.
They're black.
They're black. They're blackety, 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 black. And
Legislation won't work.
Legislation won't help with the blacks
Black
unless you
Africans.
could legislate basketball instead of shooting.
We've got to have
Anyone?
African basketball.
African basketball so they can play with each other by the bushel instead of shoot each other by the bushel. Go to
By the
Chicago,
bushel.
Congo. Go to Chicago, Congo. The facts speak for themselves.
I'm sorry. I thought this was Sinclair Media.
I thought
no,
this-
all of a sudden it's bad for me to say
Oh,
black
I thought
Africans.
apparently I triggered the lady on the panel. I thought this was
Snowflake?
Sinclair, not Oberlin.
Yes, sorry.
I could be reading too much
Oprah.
into that, but that sounds like somebody who's made a habit of distinguishing between, like, say, white Africans in, like, Rhodesia and South Africa from black Africans.
Is this the type of distinction that maybe my wife also made when she was a research assistant for a prominent Holocaust denier? I don't know. You tell me. I literally got my PhD at a diploma mill, so I can't really make category distinctions like this.
Oh, you mean the Jewy Jews or the not so Jewy Jews?
You want to get rid of usury laws. You want to protect the Consumer Financial Protection Agency, and you don't want to put rules around the Jewy Jew American Jews? Read Merchant of Venice. I read the Cliff's Notes. It's really absolutely appalling.
Yes, African American.
African Americans.
Right.
By the bushel.
But they're
sold
black.
from Chicago.
I want to remind
where
you, they're
black. Black.
So black.
You know who did more to fight black on black crime than anyone else? Ian Smith in Rhodesia. You want to look at someone who really cared about protecting the blacks from themselves. Blackety black. Steve
Wow.
made that point. I didn't even know who Ian Smith was until Steve told me.
Yeah,
Steve's
what do you
so
make of
cool.
Steve Bannon trying to put out there that he's disassociated himself with Milo? How much of a total lie is that? Like a total lie or like a 99.9% lie?
I'm temporarily texting him. The great thing about that BuzzFeed piece, in addition to exposing the obvious fact of what all these people are as fascists and bigots, is that it's another great countervailing piece of evidence to all of this, like, open exchange of ideas crap. Because if you say to somebody, like, if I said to somebody a year ago, like, Milo's first of all, he's boring. Secondly, he's hiding the ball about what his real intentions in politics are to the extent he has any. And third, this is all a media creation by Steve Bannon and the Mercer family. They would have said, you're being unfair. You're not taking him at face value and engaging with his ideas. And the whole thing with the BuzzFeed piece, besides the obvious, really disturbing
There
stuff,
were no ideas.
is just watching Steve Bannon literally coach him in how to be a postmodern media
Yes.
creation while getting bankrolled by this creepy family.
There was never Breitbart was built on a complete lack of ideas as a tenet. Yes. It was a principle of his. He had, and he would say it, I have no policy prescriptions or even policy opinions. He was fighting a culture war. And, frankly,
And his tabloid story architecture, that's the other big part of it, too.
I am not convinced that Steve Bannon's number one agenda is to make sure that Trump loses, that the Republicans lose Congress. I think he wants them to lose the House because he feels like, look, if we can freeze up any type of policy arguments whatsoever, like this is what we've had, this is what the past 2 weeks have been a complete almost like a pilot case of what it would be like if there was no policy conversation whatsoever and just a culture war.
Well, you know what? Maybe you should have fucking told your friends in Hollywood and with all their bitch-ass kids in the private schools that if I could just been a fucking movie producer. None of this had to happen.
It's true.
All right? So maybe you should have, instead of being like, oh, I could fucking text Sarah Jessica Parker, or whatever the fuck her name is, of Sex and the City, I'm Sam Cedar. Maybe you could have helped me out producing my fucking rap musical about the LA riots. It was a good fucking concept. But now I gotta have a fascist America.
Secret identity politics. In my experience, discussing abortion with pro-lifers often comes down to the idea of personal responsibility, which is ultimately defined by nothing but individual preference. I feel like the ultimate goal is to have every pregnancy evaluated by a panel comprised of Mike Pence's and Sarah Palin's, which basically means only rich Christian white people have access to abortion. Militant apathy. Given Trump's personal history, the fact that he's associated with himself with being anti-abortion is complete bullshit. Does anybody think that he wouldn't or hasn't availed himself of abortion services at some point in his scumbag life? Of course. Pinko Taco. Bill O. fiddled with a kid. I'm sure of it.
Whoa.
Contagious Chameleon. Is there a Bill O'Reilly version of La Poupée? Do the IMs work? Jay Tingle. Everyone knows who Terry Richardson is. He's Jackie Lomax's stepson. Ira Glass sounding motherfucker wins the day. The other part of Delay's action, Northern Marianas, is that their business there also exploited Chinese labor to provide prostitution services. Also, Abramoff was the appointment on the deal. Question for Jamie. Is Suicide Girls run by men? Was it run by men?
It was and is run by a man and a woman, I believe.
Okay. Abiki Bar, Trump, Sarkar. Escape Hatch. Hey, Sam. Whitefish, Montana is the town Richard Spencer is from, and the small haven where they had a neo-Nazi rally to intimidate the Jews in town. You'd think there's any connection to the Zinky thing, or that's just a locus for awful people who gather to do awful things?
No connection. Those guys are losers. We're all separated. There's no connection.
MR member. Hi, Sam.
There's
Boy,
black people in the Virgin Islands.
With Body Snatcher Lawyer was deeply disturbing. Oh, you know what? Did you mention this yesterday?
What?
We got an email. Remind me this tomorrow, will you, Brendan? We got an email from a doctor who wanted to make it clear that when you have, it is only these situations where people approach you after the person has died. When you sign up to be an organ donor beforehand, his contention is that it is not an issue.
Yeah, I'm going to really believe a doctor and a globalist.
Here's the point. Always, always, always just do a little bit of research. And certainly if it sounds too good to be true, then it probably is. The fact that human remains can be sold for someone's sick ritual or petty wants is obscene. That said, will you be purchasing Jimmy Dore for your garden compost? Chris Lopaco, you going on Tim Black's show or what? I told him I would. We haven't communicated about it. Communist dog. Didn't Bellows' children sue to give their mother full custody of them? Matt Epish. That one's too long.
Those kids are gonna bowling themselves if you come out.
Epish, you got to send me that as an email. Very pleased that people are getting more open about sexual harassment in the workplace and ditching Whisper Network instead of talking sexual assault and coercion like it's gossip. Let's try to hear from those affected and take this shit as seriously as possible. Thank you for sharing your story, Jamie. Let's give the rest of us a lot more courage to taking these bastards on.
That's good to hear.
Slippin' Jimmy. Just want to point out that the GOP is highlighting the increase of the standard deduction in their plan by $11,400, but they conveniently fail to point out they also plan to get rid of personal exemptions, which would increase a family of four's taxable by $16,200. The net effect of the increased standard deduction and removal of exemptions results in an increase in their taxable income by $4,800. Republican talking heads insist they're going to increase the child tax credit, but it's fitting to note they have not specified what they would increase that credit to. Note they are very specific about lowering tax rates and removing the estate tax, which benefits the richest Americans, but the one area of their plan that would benefit the poor and middle class is still unclear and totally specific and not specifically defined. Yeah. Also, you mentioned Tom Price yesterday. I want to say that Trump signed an EO that forced his cabinet members to sign an agreement stating they would not monetarily benefit for several years after their service. I can tell you that that also happened during the Clinton administration and then was rescinded just before it ended. The DX Fool. Hello, proletariats. Regarding your friend David Cross, the guy from Alvin and the Chipmunks movies, do you care to comment about what actress Charlene Yee said Cross told her 10 years ago that was racist and sexist? His apology to her and wife Amber Tamblyn defending him up to a point. How does an old schlub like Cross marry a babe like Russ Tamblyn's daughter, Peaches? I can tell you that Cross, as far as I can tell, came out and apologized for it. He, I don't know much more. I mean, he, in my experience, there was a lot of circumstances where he would, particularly back in the day, constantly be in character. That doesn't forgive it. It simply explains like what the context was. And Michael does these characters here. I don't know what happens when you're out and about, but
I actually don't in general.
Yeah, it's not good to do.
It's like very contextual. Like, I'm not saying I never do, but things are pretty contextual.
I mean, I think it's even like, it can get dicey even when it's in context. When it's out of context, it's bad. And I think he probably regrets
I think
it.
it's the funniest fucking routine I've ever heard that you do.
Context. Context.
Cross is usually going around whining like, oh, George Bush, I'm gay and I don't like people being mean to each other. Let's protest Iraq. I'm an irony Jew comedian. Wah, wah, wah. Finally, you bust out some great fucking Asian material. I never heard it before.
I think there's a lot of people who have become far more sensitive to this stuff. And as just broadly speaking, there's been more opportunity to become sensitive to it. I think it's very easily to be isolated and unaware of the implications of stuff that you do, prior to like things like social media and whatnot. If you lived a fairly like narrow perspective, and certainly I can tell you that if you hang out only with comedians, you have really no sense of what normal human beings, and over an extended time, again, I'm not making excuses. I'm explaining a dynamic. When I was, specifically when I was a comedian, and all my friends were comedians, and I literally had no other friends, and we would go to parties, and we would be horrible to everyone there, in one way or another, like just bad guests. And if we were making each other laugh, that was almost like a moral imperative. So I'm just explaining the world, after a while that got a little bit old for me, but I think people have gotten a little bit more woke, as it were.
Oh God, come on. Let's not use that term, though, please.
Well, I know.
Let's retire it.
I was simply trying to fix the culture in many ways.
Who's that? Oh, is that
James
Google?
Damar.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the Google doofus.
Solidarity with Rojava. Yesterday's caller refused fascism as a front group for the RCP Revcom, a Maoist party with an obscure cult of personality around their chairman, Bob Avakian.
Okay, that's the Bob Avakian
Protesting is great, but be wary of this group as they tend to co-opt movements such as BLM.
Yes, I wanted to learn more, but the reason I wasn't sort of embracing it was I wanted to know, and now I do.
First, Joseph Paulin, why did Sam not play Jimmy's song on Friday? Was it because he was on the road? Yes, I wasn't even aware of it. What is the song? We'll play it on Friday. Second, why are you guys ignoring a lot of stories that only people like Jimmy Dore are covering?
That's a good goddamn point. Maybe because Sam Seder, Michael Brooks, and the whole cabal of them are MSNBC sellouts.
Like the DNC purge of Ellison supporters by Perez. Like I said, my plan was to have Naomi Constant on Thursday or Friday. It didn't work out.
They don't give a shit about you.
U.S. State Department admits al-Nusra used chemical weapons in Syria, or the fact like 5% of the world's uranium is located in Niger.
Well, wait. Okay. So I don't think the State Department agreed to that. There's a report, which I'm going to cover tonight, about a Saudi prince telling rebels that we were backing to light Damascus up. But there has been no, as far as I understand, actual acknowledgement in credible media that it was Nusra using chemical weapons.
Meanwhile, all you guys do all day is bash people on the left, like Jimmy and Tim Black. Well, we haven't gotten to it yet, but maybe we'll do it off camera. Also, you praise the Kurds while ignoring the ethnic cleansing of Arabs and Yazidis they have done.
They haven't ethnically cleansed Yazidis. They've actually protected Yazidis from ISIS, and there is legitimate
Ethnic cleansing, protecting. Okay,
And
whatever.
there's legitimate stories
course.
about Kurdish human rights violations in those areas. But I got to tell you, like, as somebody, and I'm not interested in drawing any equivalencies or excusing any behavior. I'm sure if you got down to it, there's probably not a single faction in Syria that hasn't committed some type of human rights atrocity. But I think it's pretty incredible that you go out defending Assad and Russian and Iranian forces that are fighting a proxy war there and have committed by far the most civilian casualties of anyone there. And then you're focused on the Kurds, who by far have the least footprint by far of anybody, and also just liberated Raqqa. I think that's pretty, like, if you're and have a leftist agenda, and if your only metric is that the Kurds practically are saying, in the situation we're in,
his only
we will
metric
take,
is what
the United States. The United States indirectly backs the Kurds.
His
That's
only
it.
metric is what
If-
Jimmy Dore has done
I don't
his
even
video
think
on.
Jimmy gets into that, but I know that he has
No?
some. There's some other. I don't know if he gets into the Kurds. I know he gets into a lot of other nonsense about Syria, but I know that there's a bunch of tanky idiots who, because the Kurds take like intel on ISIS movements from our intelligence services because they're fighting a fucking war, and that's what you do. You cut deals with people. That, of course, the Kurds need to be bad because they're so myopic that the only thing that they could see is what the U.S. functionality is, instead of the United States is violating human rights, Saudi Arabia is violating human rights, Iran is violating human rights, Russia is violating human rights, Assad is violating human rights, and maybe the Kurds are too. But if you're interested in any type of left-wing solidarity there, and you're not interested in the Kurds more so than a neo-fascist, neoliberal who's using, at the very least, barrel bombs on his people before you even get to the consensus on chemical
But
weapons.
it's not chemical.
Yeah, get the fuck out of here, man. Don't write this nonsense.
Was that Ballin?
Yes, and I know you watch that sweaty little Maoist bastard who says he's a third worldist on YouTube and is on like fucking Iranian
All
state
right,
television.
Okay, you're taking
That
Joseph
annoys me.
Ballin too seriously. I think, with all due respect.
Well, I'm taking him just about as seriously as you take Jimmy Dore.
Do you think he'll
Well,
change his mind
just-
when the U.S. stabs the Kurds in the back?
Well, then it's
yeah,
a real
then
problem.
then the
Then
Kurds
it's a
will
real
be
problem.
legit. Exactly, and that was what's gonna. If Mike Flynn was still there and they fucked over the Kurds, then the Kurds would be great.
More relevantly, Joseph Cirincione was on Twitter. I was reading him. He's becoming very concerned that there's becoming some type of bipartisan consensus around the. I don't even know the benefit. I don't even know how to argue this. I don't even know how to articulate it. The validity of an attack on North Korea. That is extremely disturbing. Doe, see Charlie Pierce Esquire on how everyone hates Gorsuch. Kagan and Bader Ginsburg slapping him down. Andy's pissed off Roberts. That doesn't surprise me. And Monara. Atrio speculated the payout may be so high for Bill O'Reilly because this time maybe there wasn't just audio, but video documentation. Wow. Teacher BB, why not push for progressive support for ending the property tax deduction on all but one's primary residence? I think that's huge, and I would say even on same in terms of mortgage interest deduction on anything but primary residence.
It's crazy that you can.
It's crazy. A Square, just joining in. Did you hear Manchin over the weekend? Not sure which. Mentioned Kansas when talking about the tax plan. Do we have that clip? Did you pull that clip from Kansas? Yeah, the farmer. Yeah, do we have that? All right, well, we'll play that tomorrow. Billy Buckner. O'Reilly's $32 million settlement is amplified as a product of an attorney documenting her abuse over 15 years. The case for not repealing the estate tax is so we do not have a feudal society, so that at least tax what syphilitic leaves to their offspring over $5 to $11 million. Also, is there a survey for those who have the show on but don't really listen to it? Finally, Sam, you and Joe Scarborough are both Red Sox fans. Just saying. It's not my fault.
Why is Scarborough a Red Sox fan?
I don't know. Nick from Manitoba. Hey, Sam, great show today. Michael, I'm liking your new Jordan Peterson impression. Something to consider. First, Peterson's whole worldview is that postmodernism and neo-Marxism are going to drive the West into chaos, leading to authoritarianism like that of Hitler and Stalin. The sole safeguard against this slippery slope is freedom of speech.
If I can't say that my teaching assistant has a nice rack, then we're really heading into Marxism and Maoism. I mean, the whole thing is crazy.
He loves Dostoevsky, the Gulag Archipelago guy, Freud, and Jung. He also got like a weird Lindsey Graham high-pitched Canadian voice. Lastly, he uses expressions like, what the hell's the bloody point of that? And these bloody authoritarian social justice warriors. I hope this is helpful. Take what you like.
This girl came in class. I said, you look like a goddamn freak. And now I might actually have to talk with my supervisor about it. I mean, really, we're just on a road to a cultural revolution. The whole thing is crazy.
Sam, I am. Have you seen Andy Borowitz's stand-up about Donald Trump? Hilarious. Almost as good as Greg about libertarians. Colin Doucet. USA Today calling Jacinda Ardern, the new New Zealand Prime Minister, Trump-like, was horrible reporting. Right, Michael, the movie you were talking about was called Denial, starring Rachel Weisz. USA Today.
Great movie.
Okay. Ben, can we have right-wing Mandela run for office instead of this? Producer Lauren.
What?
Oh. Terry Richardson is best known for photo shoots for Candy Magazine and is best friends with James Franco. Richardson's also known Lech, and his wife is okay with that. Glad Jamie survived. P.S. I prefer Magnus Hastings. Terry's Dyer on the Tumblr platform. Lefty Uno. I'm probably going to get hate for this, but Jamie wins.
I don't get any. I'm like in confusion.
Dingo ate my baby. Can Michael respond to my I am from Friday regarding capitalism?
Dude, you got to be more specific.
Jules. Thank you, Jamie, for sharing your story. Not easy. Sam, you should talk to Eve about Yazidis. He has done several photo stories about them. Oh. Eve, it's someone we know. It's my sister. I didn't pick up on it. I love Sarah Palin. I get why you hate Jimmy Dore now. You're an Aristotelian, and Jimmy is a Platonist. The great thinker Lyndon LaRouche warned us about people like you. Listen, Sam, I know this new revelation is bewildering, but I implore you to accept this fact and cease your operations immediately. Ben Carson is using his I thought we were brothers. Why are you asking me questions like that voice? I'm Missouri.
Why you gotta throw me like that, Al?
If you're going to interview Jamie, do her the justice of putting her on screen. Congrats to both you and Jamie for one of the best spontaneous interviews I've seen, both honest and poignant.
Totally unprompted.
Lauren. Hey, guys, going to a student event in Auburn Wednesday that relates to Jones. With Doug being tied with Moore in that Fox News poll, there's not a lot of hope in the state now. There's a lot of hope in the state now. More people feel like he's going to win. My dad originally felt like it was impossible. Now he actually feels like Doug might win. I know it's only October, but I feel like his popularity will grow. I have a friend in Georgia who knows more people in Alabama than I do, and he's going to encourage them to vote. I've given him information on Doug, how to register online, find your polling, etc. We'll see. Ilmic. At first, I wanted to and mention the fashion industry is disgusting, but it's ubiquitous. Toxic Stew. Jamie, when the U.S. stabs the Kurbs in the back again.
Right.
I mean.
Exactly.
We did that in the first Iraq War. Jamie,
That's true.
Jamie and MR Gang, my father was an artist. He always treated models as fellow professionals and equals and respected their talent. The it's an art excuse is bullshit. The story of a sexual predator using his power in the industry to assault women. Rigorka in Irving, not only was his wife a research assistant, but his mother was a translator and father a source for a book on Hungary. Ridicule. Jamie's story is a cautionary tale for teenage girls or older who are generally savvy. Most of us have been in awkward positions where we expected the situation to be wild-ish, though we assume we can handle whatever happens. Lines get crossed. We don't always know how to walk away unscathed. Sometimes it can take years to shake off embarrassing regrets. Denver Dave, hey, Congressman Green, Dr. Carson, how much brain tissue have you had removed from your brain? Sam, Michael isn't working his way out of a job. Michael is not working his way out of a job. Chris Burdick, no way would Carson let them cut the budget for the machine that sucks the blood out. That's his favorite part of the job. Hypnotic genes. It's actually simple. They cut funding to the program so it can't function properly. And when it doesn't function, they say, see, we need to cut it because it doesn't function properly. Yes. Other white meat. Is IM working? Not safe to drink. Hey, guys, sent a tweet your way on Russia Trump and was wondering about how valid it sounded versus alarmist absurdity. I would probably say alarmist absurdity. You know, I think this Gorka guy might be racist. Just a feeling. All right, just a couple more calls, and then we're out of here.
Chicago bushels from the Congo.
I'm sorry. One call, and then we're out of here. I didn't realize how late it was. Sorry, folks. Calling from a 224 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, it's Karthik. I'm from Illinois.
Thanks for calling. What's on your mind?
I just wanted to go over Trump's tax code. There's been a lot of talk lately about how it's primarily meant to be cuts for the rich, but when you look closer into it, there are cuts for some of the middle segments of the income bracket, more specifically around the 40 to 50,000 region, where you're going to see a cut from that 25% to like a 15%. In addition to that, you see some business tax cuts too with the C Corps and, you know, the pass-through entities going to like a 15% flat tax. So, you know, just from a general perspective, I'm a little curious why, you know, there isn't necessarily benefits with that, why there's just a lot of talk about this tax cuts on the rich when there's sort of, I guess, unforeseen tax cuts, if you will, for some of the other middle segments of the economy.
Well, I don't know about the one that you're referring to that goes towards people targeted at $40,000 to $50,000 a year. Frankly, I'm not convinced that anybody needs a tax cut. And if I was to do any type of tax reform, I would be raising taxes on the rich in multiple ways. Okay, but I can tell you this: as someone who has a pass-through, right, an S corp, not a C corp, or could be an LLC, that is a disaster, and there's absolutely no reason whatsoever for a pass-through to get lower taxes. I can assure you, it will not in any way. Dictate what I do in terms of, like, I don't know what it's supposed to do other than enrich me more. But it's not like I'm going to go and expand this business beyond what I had planned to do anyways. No way. I'm just going to take that money and I'm going to go buy myself a first sink or something. That's basically it.
A first sink?
Yeah, it's just my a way of saying wasteful.
I think you gave Michael a little more material.
Well, what do you think the value of that is? So when you look at a place like Kansas, right, where Sam Brownback had this idea and tried it out in 2010, or got elected and tried it out in 2012. And the number of S corps and LLCs almost went up by I don't know, I think it was from 189,000, something like 330,000. And tax revenues fell through the floor. They underperformed the U.S. and states around them in terms of on any economic measure and in terms of jobs. What's the value of it?
So I can't really speak to that one specific instance, right? But when you look at the Tax Policy Institute's, sort of analysis on this, what you'll find is that they say that many of these C Corp companies could, expand the amount of jobs that are provided. And, from a general sense, this sort of makes a little bit of sense, right? I mean, the vast majority of small businesses are pass-through entities. And, the biggest impediment on their input costs tend to be the costs that they have to put out with regard that are inherently there. So,
now, wait a second. I just want to be clear here. I just want to be clear. We have the best experiment that has existed in time to measure the efficacy of this policy. And you're telling me you don't want to speak to that. Arthur Laffer was literally the advisor who walked Brown back through this thing. You don't want to speak to that, but you want to talk about hypothetically, a hypothetical example from a partisan tax group that says there should be more jobs there. I can tell you, as a small business owner, as one of these individuals, that I will expand if I think that there is more demand for my product. Period. That my business, when I went into business, it was with basically an algorithm. I need this much this much demand, and I will expend that much. And I try and maintain more or less that dynamic. There are times where I'll spend a little more because I'm going to redo the website, but I'm going to amortize that over the course of the next 2 years or something, whatever it is. But I'm going to take that money, I'm going to put it in my pocket.
Okay, so in any case, let's split this up into two different scenarios, right? You know, I'm still a little confused. Why, even if you take the instance where a business owner decides to take the money and either keeps it with them or invests it somewhere else, right? I don't see why that necessarily is less impactful to the overall economy. In one instance,
because there are some.
Hold on.
Well, you just asked me a question. I'm going to answer.
Of money. No. But I'm not done with the question, right? The velocity of money in a person's hand is going to be far more direct than the money that's being directly portrayed, through a government entity, right? The money that we're getting through tax revenue that's coming to a government entity, about 30% of that is going to be lost to some sort of bureaucratic measure, right?
No.
You can almost completely negate that loss altogether.
No. Where does that money go? Wait. That 30% money that you think gets lost in the bureau, where do you think that money goes? You think it falls behind a filing cabinet? Where do you think it goes? Let me ask you a question. Okay, now you've asked me the question. Why does some money actually have a multiplier effect and other money does not? And why does some money have a greater multiplier effect than other money? And it is most easily expressed by who. I'm telling you now. I'm going to explain it to you. Okay? Because if you give me $1 and you give Michael $1, Michael is going to spend that dollar quicker than I am. I promise you.
Patreon/TMBS. Get all content today.
He is going to spend that dollar quicker than I am. That's the easiest explanation. I make more money than he does.
That's fine.
He has more.
That's fine.
He has more bills. He has more. To get to my level of luxury, to get to my.
Well, I
level
still have
of
nicer clothes than you. Yeah.
The point is, he's going to spend that dollar quicker than I am. And if you give it to someone, there's really no other explanation I can tell you. He's going to spend it quicker.
As opposed to a small business owner.
Small business owner. Yeah. I mean, look, I'm not saying all small business owners, but listen, all you're going to get are wealthy people who are going to then become S corps. They're going to be private practices. They're going to be lawyers. They're going to be professionals.
But you're missing.
And you're just going to avoid taxes.
That's sort of a very, very subtle deviation. The fact of the matter remains.
It's very explicit.
If you look at, if you take the standard small business owner, right?
Like me.
He's most likely operating through a pass-through entity.
Yes,
right?
like
Most
me.
likely operating through a pass-through entity. Why is it problematic if he has more money in his pocket that he can either use for his own investment, whether that be into a bank, whether that be for his retirement fund, whether it be through the economy directly, or to use to hire more workers or directly into his business, right? Because either way, the money is traveling faster. Because
by becoming a pass-through, it is a great way to avoid taxes. Because you can become a pass-through if you're a lawyer, right? You can become a pass-through if you are a therapist. How's a therapist going to expand their business? They're going to get a new couch?
Okay.
What are they going to do that's going to increase the productivity?
That was the latest curve, new chair.
Look, if you want to give wealthy people money because you are the last thoughtful person in the country who genuinely believes that trickle-down works, be my guest. Be my guest.
I'm not
but
necessarily
no
trying
one
to
believes
say
that.
trickle down works.
That's
The
what you're
idea that
advocating. That's what
No,
it is.
okay.
It's
No,
trickle
no,
down.
The notion that it's only rich individuals that are operating a C corp company or as
No,
a pass
you mean
is fundamentally
S-corp.
false.
You mean
No,
S-corp.
it is fundamentally false. The vast majority of businesses, right, with the vast majority of small businesses, again, these are people that aren't necessarily,
Dude,
earning,
I'm one of those people. You don't need to lecture me about that. I am one of those people.
Okay, that's fine. But, okay, all I'm saying, right, is if you take that money, whether you pocket that money, whether you invest it into a bank, right, whether you're storing that money is traveling faster than if the government were to get it through tax revenues. So the question
But let me ask you this. But if that government, if the government is spending it on people or on things that will actually, as opposed to investing it in the stock market, as opposed to sitting on the money.
Tell me what the government could spend it on, where the money would move faster through society than if a person were to keep
Public
that money
works.
and invest it as they please.
Infrastructure
Okay, fine. Tell me
spending,
public
food
works that would-
stamps, welfare.
Okay, fine. Tell me. Okay. So we have increased infrastructure spending in the past.
Dude, listen, hold on. I got to stop you here because it's the end of the show.
but
Here you go.
okay.
Look it. Hold on. You
Okay.
quiet.
You say we invest in infrastructure, right? But infrastructure doesn't improve.
Quiet.
Because
Quiet. I'm going to tell you something. You can call back tomorrow because we're at the end of the show now. All right? No. Call back because what I'm going to do for you tomorrow when you call back is I'm going to have a series of quotes to you from Republican lawmakers from Kansas who tried your experiment, who bought the theory that you're proposing, who did exactly what you're calling for now. The policy you're stating has been tried, not 100 years ago, but literally just ended months ago because it was such a disaster. Do you understand what I'm telling you? There is the exact thing you're proposing. You can talk to me. Listen, this is
right now.
the exact thing you're proposing. You don't need to go and look at what someone's theory is about it. I'm telling you that I just watched a guy jump off a building and land on the ground after they did it. And you're telling me, well, that's fine, but the theory says he should be able to fly. And I'm telling you, the body is still warm. There's blood all over the floor there. He's dead. And you're telling me, well, look.
Okay.
But why shouldn't he been able to spread his arms out like this? And I'm telling you,
this is something.
he's splattered.
Okay, but the point is, right, when you look at this mathematically, right, it's not necessary. Like, it is almost an economic truth that the
It's
velocity of
almost
money
as
within
if there is no economic truth.
Okay,
that this isn't
it's
about
true
math
the
that you
velocity
want to
of
do.
money, when it is.
You know
when it
what?
is in a
I would
person's
recommend
hand,
you
when
do
they're
this in a
investing it
classroom
the
because
economy.
right now this is not. Call back tomorrow. Call back tomorrow. Call back tomorrow. No. I can't. Theoretically, we should be able to fly if we have this thing. I've done the math.
I think you're missing something, and that is the wing hypothesis.
All right.
Oh my
I'm
God.
sorry,
I
folks.
hate
We're out
when
of
people call in with that shit when we're already running late. It's incredible. It's like
It
uncanny.
is uncanny.
It seems like, all right.
Well, he had been holding for a long time.
It's time for
so
us to go.
I
so let me
apologize. We
take
do
one
have
more
to go
phone
because
call.
I literally have to. I got times now for 2 IMs.
Really? Because I
Citizen
think
of the world sees the means of oxygenization. Jeez, I can't pronounce anything today. And the final IM of the day. Ugh. Michael, your Patreon page is confusing. Do Brooksy level supporters get the illicit histories?
Yes.
Bye.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar.